IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. We are getting closer and closer to game day. That's Trevor Trowbridge. That's Ryan Roberts. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we're here to kind of put a bow on our preparations for Notre Dame versus Stanford. The Irish are going to be home this weekend after a much-needed bye week for a team that was pretty banged up. Coming out of that Louisville game, 3:30 on Saturday. It's going to be on NBC. Notre Dame is a 23-point favorite. The over-under has been set at 45.5 all week. That hasn't really moved. The spread has gone from 23.5 to down to about 22 to 22.5. Now back up to 23 as of right now, looking at least at the ESPN stat line. So a game that they expect Notre Dame to win convincingly. We'll see if that can happen or not. We're going to talk about keys to victory on the offense and defense. Then we will make our predictions for this game. Once we conclude that, these guys will go on about their business, and they both have very busy days. And I'll be joined by Bill Bender, and we're going to preview what is going to be a great weekend of college football from a matchup standpoint. I don't know how the games are going to play out. Sometimes, guys, you have a weekend like last weekend where you're like, there's not a ton of marquee matchups. And then there's just wild games, tons of upsets, wild comebacks. And then this week, you're like, oh, look at all these ranked versus ranked teams and 4-1s versus 4-1. It's going to be a great weekend. And it's a bunch of duds. We don't know what the games are going to look like, but there's a lot of great matchups, fellas. And there's a good chance that my prediction about no undefeateds left could be mostly come true within the next couple weeks when you look at the schedule. So there's not going to be many undefeated teams left in the Power 5 level over the next couple weeks, but it's going to be a ton of fun. But of course, guys, the main event is going to be this weekend between Notre Dame and Stanford. So we're going to preview that. We're going to do keys to victory predictions and have some fun with you guys all today. So let's begin. Ryan.
Yes.
This is a game you look at and you say, boy, this team is not nearly as good as Notre Dame. And this is a game where Notre Dame should dominate. And you and I had this conversation before last year's game. And it was about 16-14 late in the second quarter. And we're like, man, are we going through this again? Because the year before, you and I talked about how they should dominate Stanford, and they got beat. This is one of those games, Ryan, that is not a show-me game from a standpoint if you beat a really good team. Stanford's not terrible, but they're not good either, where right. You beat a really good team. But it's more of a show-me game for us to find out, are you past or at least are you taking steps towards getting past this erratic nature? And I pose this to you, Ryan, because of what you said to me when we were talking before the show, which is this is what they should do. I just don't know if they're actually going to do it because we still don't know what version of this Notre Dame team is going to show up on a week-to-week basis. Hopefully, this can be that game where you start to string together a couple really good performances in a row to make us feel like, hey, maybe they're figuring it out.
Bye weeks are for growth, okay? They're for growth as a football team. For me, this bye week was about me understanding finally that I cannot predict the psychology of this football team. I have no idea what team we're going to get on Saturday. Zero idea. Because I remember last year, Brian, we were having this conversation before the Stanford game of like, dude, what happened to them the year before? Notre Dame's going to come out with piss and vinegar, and they're going to be ready to go, and they're going to knock them in the mouth, and it is going to be from start to finish a massive blowout. Now, obviously, Notre Dame ended up getting a massive victory last year on the scoreboard, but they did not come out on fire. They did not. They had to kind of weather the storm early and then eventually get into a groove. So I have no idea how this team's going to come out. I zero idea. I mean, I keep coming back to the season that we have seen so far, and we have just seen so many different types of Notre Dame teams. Like we've seen teams that lose to MAC teams. We've seen teams that come out flat against MAC teams. We've seen teams come out to pummel a Big Ten team by 59 points. We've seen a team that goes into a hostile environment and matches blow for blow against a top 25 SEC team. We have just seen so many different versions of Notre Dame. I have no idea what we're going to see on Saturday. What I do know on Saturday, though, is just from the analysis perspective, Notre Dame is way more talented than Stanford. They are. It's not even close. And it shouldn't be close, which is why it should not be close on the scoreboard ultimately. So we'll talk about it at the end. I think Notre Dame will end up having a decisive victory. We'll talk about exactly what that means at the end during the score predictions, but I am done being a psychologist. I have no idea what this team is going to be on Saturday from a pissed off perspective. I have no idea if they're going to come out ready to go, urgent. I don't know. All I know is that they are the more talented team than Stanford, and that is not very, that's not a hot take, obviously.
So, Trevor, essentially what Ryan is saying is he's adopting my prediction model for Notre Dame, which is I'm no longer predicting what will happen. I'm predicting what should happen. And there is a difference between the two because you don't know what's going to happen with this Notre Dame football team. And a lot of that, guys, it starts off with the offense. And that's where we're going to kind of dive into the keys to victory to begin with because – look, the defense has certainly played well enough for them to win all 5 games. We had some criticisms of the defense after the Northern Illinois game for legitimate reasons. They didn't finish Northern Illinois off at the end of the game. Notre Dame, I was actually doing going through my breakdowns last night, guys, of the Northern Illinois game, and I'm looking at the number of plays that Notre Dame had in the second half. They only had 5 possessions, and 2 of them were like those late you're down or possessions, but they only ran 6, 9, 12, 16, 20 plays in the second half. Now, part of that was because of the offense. They had the turnover and 3 and out, but the other part of it was the defense couldn't get off the field. They would eventually hold Northern Illinois or turn them over on downs, but it was after a 5-minute drive. But you still gave up 16 points. You played good enough to win. The offense is the side of the ball that has been in my opinion, accounted for much of the erratic nature. Ryan, you talked about not playing great against a MAC team. Well, the defense held them to barely over 200 yards and 3 points. Again, it comes back to the offense. The offense is primarily the side of the ball that goes up and down. And then I think there is some emotional aspects that do kind of bleed into both units, even though the defense still tends to play better in those situations. So when you talk about the offense and the keys to victory, guys, number one, we all know what it is. You have to have a fast start. Now, the good news is for Notre Dame is they're coming off of without a doubt, their best start of the season against Louisville, and it was needed. Louisville comes out, scores in the opening drive. Notre Dame answers with a drive right down the field, convert a 4th down to get that drive going. You punch it into the end zone. Your defense then gives you the ball back around midfield, just shy of midfield. You go down, you score again. Your special teams then gives you another short field, a very, very short field. You punch it into the end zone, and next thing you know, you got 21 points in the first quarter. That's the epitome of a fast start, fellas. Now, obviously, they didn't build on that in later quarters, but the start was fast and allowed them to kind of go into protect mode once Leonard got landed on by the D tackle. To me, it became kind of obvious they were intentionally trying to do some of that stuff. And then, of course, you had the Jadarian Price fumble, which I think caused them to and you couldn't protect the quarterback to cause the offense to say, hey, look, let's just kind of get out of this game. And when they needed to ramp it up, they could. But the start was the key. Now we need to find out if Notre Dame can do this in back-to-back games. And we've talked before, the offense has scored on their opening drive of every game except for one. And it was the Miami of Ohio game. I believe it's the only game Notre Dame did not score in the opening possession. But you couldn't string them together. Well, against Louisville, they did. It's important in this game for all the reasons we discussed. The offense needs a confidence boost. Coming out of the bye week, this offense needs to come out, in my opinion, and really be effective early to say all the work you've done the last 2 weeks, guys, it's paying off because this team is ready to roll. It puts any doubt in Stanford's mind. Ryan, we were talking about fast starts back in 2022 because it's so important. And the thing we talked about in that Stanford game in 2022 was you can't let this team have any faith that they can actually be in this football game. You can't give them any hope, and that's exactly what the Notre Dame offense did in that game by sputtering out of the gate. They can't do that this game. They did it last year again by letting Stanford get off to an early start and get a lead in that game, 2 different leads in that game early in the game. They've got to put this team away early, not just for practical reasons, but I do think it's important for the offense to come out of this bye with a lot of confidence. Hey, this is 2 games in a row. We've come out against Power 5 teams or Power 4 teams playing hot, putting the team away early. I think that's an important confidence booster, and it only gives your defense even more confidence that they don't have to carry this team. So fast start, obviously number one. Number 2, this is more practical for this game, fellas. The biggest thing for me coming out of the break, Trevor, is the biggest question I have. It's not, what's your pass game? Those things are all important. We'll talk about some of these different aspects, but the biggest thing for me is, have you shored up your pass protection issues? That's key number 1 after the fast start is you've got to protect the quarterback, which comes down to individual players doing their job, but more importantly, Notre Dame recognizing and addressing the protection issues that they've had. If they can do that against Stanford, honestly, I think a lot of this other stuff kind of takes care of itself, Trevor. That's my my first practical key after the fast start is, can you protect the quarterback in this game?
We've talked about it all week. That's where it starts, right? We can scheme up X's and O's for receivers down the field and post-snap switches and pre-snap motion, but it's all for naught if Riley Leonard has less than 1 second to throw the football and get the ball out of his hands, right? So I'm going to be looking for the adjustments we are all hoping that they did in the bye week from a schematic standpoint, because we saw what the depth chart looks like. Doesn't look like there's a whole lot of movement there from the starters on the offensive line. So yeah, protecting the quarterback is going to be first and foremost, because that is going to hold the key to opening up the passing game for Notre Dame and give Riley Leonard the confidence boost that he needs. Because like we've talked about all week, this is going to be a really important 3-week stretch for them in the development of their downfield passing game, and it starts on Saturday.
I mean, you never want to, you just never want to be, limited in any capacity offensively, right? And I think that when you are a team that can only get the ball out quickly and you don't have enough time to let things develop, you don't have time to let your quarterback go through reads, you don't have time to do anything other than the quick game and getting the ball out in fractions of the time, then you're limiting your passing offense and you're limiting yourself as well. I mean, I've used the analogy before, but it's like if I have more bullets in the barrel, I have a better chance of shooting something, right? Like it's very simple, right? And I have more ammo in my favor in the war, in the sport of battle. So, for a lack of a better metaphor there. So I just think that for me, like this is a game where this is about long-term sustainability more than anything. Like we could talk about fast start against Stanford, and it's very important, as you already talked about, Brian. But I would say like the passing game, especially getting that start and then really beginning to feel itself and to protecting the quarterback, I think that is more for the long term here, right? Like we want to see, can we now begin to build off of this? Because you know that Notre Dame is going to have a good running game. You do. You have a quarterback that is super dynamic. But overall, you need a offense that can do enough in every capacity. And obviously the passing game has not been up to par up until this point, but there are some limitations. Yes, Riley Leonard needs to be more consistent. Yes, the wide receivers need to play better. But at the end of the day, if you are getting fractions of seconds to throw a football and not be able to get the ball out on time, that is limiting your passing game. What has been the biggest thing that we hate about defenses that play Notre Dame over the last few years? Everything is so condensed. It's like heavy boxes. Let's siphon everything inside because nobody believes you when you're talking about creating explosive plays in the passing game. And then part of creating explosive plays in the passing game is getting time to throw the football. So that's obviously a big ingredient to this recipe long-term, obviously.
As you build on that, guys, that also plays a role in what I think is important in this game, which is I expect Notre Dame to be a big play offense against Stanford. They will make some big plays against Stanford. I have no doubt about that. They've done that every game. Even Northern Illinois game, they had a couple big plays in that game. The question is going to be, can you consistently move the football and efficiently move the football? And that's why my next key is moving the chains. And this isn't a third down offense conversation alone. This is sort of an every down thing, which is, yeah, okay, great. You can make big plays, especially against inferior opponents. But we need to see that this football team can add some efficiency to the offense, because I think that's where this offense has been lacking. It's a very inefficient offense, very low yards per attempt in the pass game. Despite a 68% completion percentage over the last 3 games from Riley Leonard, he's at over 65 on the season. But again, it's a very inefficient offense. Your run game looks efficient from a yards per carry standpoint at 6.2, but it's not. You're feasting on big play after big play after big play. So in this game, fellas, there's 2 downs I want to see. Okay, how are you going to be in this game coming out of this break? Are you going to be good on first down? And does that then put you in position to be good on third down? Because when you talk about all the different issues that are plaguing the Notre Dame offense, and it's the offensive line, it's, quarterback's got to be better, receivers got to be better, all these different things, it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways that has manifested itself this season is a really poor third down offense. Notre Dame ranks 104th this season on third down. And a big part of that is that lack of efficiency on first and second down has also hindered them, in my opinion, on third down. And then the lack of impactful ability in the throwing game, which ties back to key number 2, impacts it as well. But they've got to be good at moving the chains. Ryan, when you look at it, is if Notre Dame can get ahead of schedule early and put some drives together and then put points on the board from those drives, you put this team away pretty early.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, early downs, especially like Stanford, we know what they're going to do. I mean, we've seen Gathan Bernadelle and Tristan Sinclair play enough at this point. If Notre Dame fans, it's like they're just going to attack downhill all day, right? Like they're going to try to win first down because they don't think you could throw the ball down the field, and they shouldn't based on film. Like they shouldn't. They shouldn't trust you to consistently have a vertical passing game or having a ton of time to throw the football. They shouldn't trust that. So like that second level, David Bailey coming off the edge, like they are going to peel their ears back and pin their ears back, and they're going to make a lot of plays in the backfield, or they're at least going to try to make plays in the backfield because they want to put you behind the sticks. Notre Dame has preached for a long time, or at least under Marcus Freeman's tenure, that they are an offensive line driven football team that is going to run the ball at a high rates. Well, the negative to that is if you do get behind the sticks, then you're off schedule naturally, right? So they want you to work from 2nd 11, 2nd and 9, even 2nd and 8. Like they want you to work behind the sticks a ton because they don't trust that you can efficiently win in the passing game on those longer yardage opportunities, right? So yes, they are going to come out aggressively. I imagine that Stanford is going to blitz a ton from the second level because I wouldn't put either of those linebackers in coverage either. Like I would be blitzing them all day to try to wreak a little havoc. And Notre Dame has to show that they can create some plays on early downs, or else they are going to get into some third and not so manageables.
Trevor, you kind of get to key number 4, and it kind of plays into a lot of this, right? Is Notre Dame's got to find some pass game answers, right? And a lot of what we do with Keys to Victories, we build on things. You got to start here, then you play here, and then this leads to this, and this leads to this. Well, one of the ways that you can move the chains effectively, and this is kind of what Ryan was getting at in different points, what I've talked about, what you've talked about, which is you've got to find some pass game answers, especially on early downs, right? And to get yourself in some of those into that type of rhythm, but also on third down. Look, if you look at the games where Notre Dame has been really good on third down, it's games where Riley Leonard's really good on third down. He was really good on third down against Purdue. Really good. He was really good on third down against Miami of Ohio. Not as good on third down against Louisville. Now, the part of that was not his fault because he wasn't getting the time to throw and some different things. But the part of finding pass game answers is not Riley Leonard. Like me saying Riley Leonard being good on third down is not just because of Riley Leonard. You had a good game plan. You had good movement. You got good protection. The receivers were winning off the line. It's his numbers. I guess a better way of saying it, his numbers were good on third down because of the operation being good. So when you look at this game, Trevor, they've got to find some pass game answers. Obviously it includes protections. It includes Riley Leonard, making good decisions and reading the defense and getting the ball out accurately. But the other part of it is self-scouting yourself over the last week and saying, okay, what are we really good at? When our pass game is really rolling, why? What does it look like? What are we doing? And then leaning into that a little bit more as you get into this game. So I think finding some pass game answers is going to be big for moving the chains effectively, getting the ball out and putting the points on the board that you need to have a fast start, but really bury this Stanford team. So that way it's not, hey, we did great in the first quarter and we kind of let them hang around, but really put the pedal to the metal and really put this team away and leaving them behind you for 4 quarters, much like they did against Purdue.
They need to lean on the fact that they do have the better athletes. Put Stanford into a lot of situations where they get defensive backs chasing. Ryan just brought up that they are ideally not going to drop their linebackers back into coverage. So rub routes, crossing routes, things like that. Those are routes that you don't have to have ample amounts of time if you run them, 5-7 yards past the line of scrimmage. So I want to see more pre-snap motion to help get your receivers into more favorable matchups down the field. Look for, underneath crossing routes, anything that's not just these vertical 10 to 12 yard comeback routes. And that's the extent of the passing game. So I agree. They're going to have to find ways. And then eventually down the road, that will start to open up things in the run game as well. Open them up more so than what they have been already. So
I think it all comes down to the plan also, right? Like my biggest frustration with this team at times is like, I feel like they operate like they don't have speed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like they're just so snail paced and lethargic is not the right word, but like just so methodically driven that it's just, it's almost just like they don't, either I've been lied to about how much speed's on this team or Notre Dame hasn't fully unlocked it yet. Right. And hopefully this is a game where like, oh, there's Chris Mitchell. Yeah. Oh, that guy can run faster than I thought he could. Oh, there goes Jeremiah Love again. Oh, Riley Leonard quarterback draw for 40, right? Like I hope that game comes at some point because my biggest frustration is that I know this team has speed on the offensive side of the football. Can we scheme it up well enough? Can we be efficient in running those plays? And can we create some explosives? And all that comes down to is like, we need to open up this passing game early on in this game and just in general, early downs. Like, I need to see something, man. I want to believe so bad in this offensive trajectory, but until I see it, I still haven't seen it yet.
100%.
Well, Ryan, you talk about that, and I know that you're being somewhat sarcastic in the I've been lied to about the speed, because we know it. We've seen it on film. We saw it from Chris Mitchell. We know what KK Smith can do on film. We know what Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price can do. To your point, though, but we're not seeing it on film now enough outside of the running back room. And a lot of that has to do with a lack of confidence. It's very clear that there's a lack of confidence in the coaching staff and the players' ability to execute this, whether it's protection issues, which is more recently, whether it's not feeling comfortable that the quarterback is going to go through his reads the right way, which is what was an issue, honestly, early in the season. There's a lot of different things, receivers not playing. Like, you watch Chris Mitchell now, and then you go back and watch his Florida International film. He plays with such a different pace, such a different sense of urgency. There's a clear lack of confidence from him and in him as an example. So I think that plays a big role in it is confidence. And that's where, again, another fast start, what that does for you as an offensive coordinator. I mean, Ryan, you've coached. Trevor, you played the sport. When you are really feeling it early as a play caller, you're like, man, I got everything at my disposal now. I mean, I got to work. Riley's reading it well. We're giving him time to throw. And this whole big play sheet I got all of it. And there's times, guys, however, when you're not protecting the quarterback or your quarterback's not reading the defense, your receivers aren't doing this, that this big play sheet all of a sudden comes down to about that. You can use about that much of it, because you're just like, I got no confidence to do all these other things that we talked. We had 3 or 4 shots that we had designed in this game, but they all required us to have at least more than 2 seconds to throw the football, or they required our quarterback to make, a downfield read, which he may not be doing, or receivers do this. So I think that's a big part of it. And then as you get into the final key to victory, fellas, it really, for me, it comes down to the run game. This is a really actually a quality run defense. It's not like sometimes you're so bad at the pass that your run game numbers are a little inflated. And to a degree, that's true for Stanford. Like, I don't know that they're necessarily like a top 15 run defense, which is where I believe they're ranked. Coming to this game, let me just go find it real quick. I think they were like 15th or 16th. Trevor, do you remember specifically where they were when we talked about it? They're 12th. They're actually 12th in run defense. I don't think they're the 12th best rushing defense in college football. I think part of that is it seems to throw them very well. But when you look at their yards per attempt numbers, I think that puts them more in line with what they actually are, which is 26th. I think the way that they play, they're smart. They got really good inside linebackers that are incredibly experienced. They've been around a long time. They're not real big up front, but they're strong. They're tough kids. They're veteran kids. They're fundamentally sound. It's a pretty good run defense. And I don't know if just running right at them like you've done the last 2 games is going to necessarily be a 4-quarter recipe to great success. More importantly, it's not going to be great success when you play better teams. I want to see Notre Dame come out this game and really mix up the run game looks. Get Stanford on its heels, a team that they want to play downhill. And you can't completely avoid that. It's their 2-3 football team. You need to be able to run inside zone and counter, which is your bread and butter. But they've got to mix in some more wrinkles, Ryan, that are going to allow this run game to attack inside out as opposed to just inside. It's got to have more of an inside out approach, which puts those veteran downhill linebackers and those safeties that want to come downhill and play the run in some binds. Because you're like, hold on a second, who's got the ball? Is it Love? Is it Price? Is it Leonard? I mean, is it the jet sweep guy? Is this ball looking like it's going to hit off tackle, but it's really designed to be a bounce? I mean, there's a lot of different things that they need to do to just add some wrinkles to really mess with just the ability or prevent teams from just saying, Ryan, I'm going to play downhill. I'm going to play. You played. I kicked D-rank because you played linebacker. When you know as a middle linebacker that the run game is going from tackle to tackle, it's going to make your life a little bit easier. I think when you're talking about defending it, as far as being known, now you got to still beat those guys and all that, but it makes your life a whole lot easier when you know, hey, they're going here or here. That's it.
Well, Stanford knows what they are ultimately, right? Like Bernadelle, the former FIU transfer that's been there for a couple of years, and then Sinclair, kid number 8. Like, they know who they are. They are downhill football players. Like, they're not coverage linebackers. They're not really scrape linebackers. They're not guys that are going to work to the sideline a ton. Which is why, and that's ultimately the whole defense. Like, why do they run so much 3-man and like 3-4 looks at times? It's because they want to stop the inside run. Like, that's what they're doing. And they're trying to out leverage you, at least from a alignment perspective, on the outside edge, so that you're not just thinking like, I'm going to hit the edge all game against this team. Right. So they're trying to stop the inside run. That's what they're going to do. Number 21, the safety, I forget his name, the white kid. I don't Phillips,
Edwards. I think it's Scotty Edwards.
Scotty Edwards.
Right?
Yeah. Scotty Phillips is somebody. I don't know who that is. But yeah, Scotty Edwards playing down. He's a downhill kid. That's what they are ultimately, right? And you do not want them to be comfortable in that. You know what I want to see? I want to see number 8, Sinclair and Bernadette. I want to see them work it to the sideline. I feel like I'm echoing my scouting report of Clemson last year. Like, I want these linebackers to work out of the box. I want them to try to work to the edge. I want them to try to work to the sideline. I don't think that is advantageous for them being a very good team, because they just don't have a lot of team speed on the defensive side of the football. I think offense, they have a little bit of speed in some spots. Defensively, I don't think they have a ton of speed. Like, I like the one corner, Colin Wright. I think he's a good football player. He'll stick his nose in the run game, number 6. Like, he's okay. And the inside linebackers will stick their nose in there and they will make a ton of tackles. I think they have like 66 tackles in 5 games combined. So like, they make a lot of stops. They're a good tandem inside for that level, especially, but they are not outside the hash kids. They are not kids that want to chase Jeremiah Love working outside zone. They don't want to chase Jordan Faison on a jet sweep working outside. They don't want to chase Jadarian Price on an outside zone look. Like, they don't want to do that. That is not who they are. The 21, the safety, whose last name I already forgot. Is it Edwards? I can't even remember what his name is. It doesn't matter. He doesn't want to play outside the hashes. He doesn't want to do it. He wants to be downhill and fierce. Make this team move laterally. They do not want to do that, because the minute that you make them move laterally and you get their eyes working to the outside shoulder, that's when you hit a trap back inside for a big gain, right? That's how that works. You want to loosen up this interior, because then eventually Notre Dame will be able to lean on them. Notre Dame will be able to run on the inside at a much higher success rate than maybe early on in the football game. But you need their eyes to get going laterally. You need their body to get going laterally, because this Stanford team is designed to stop the inside run, to make everything work outside. And Notre Dame can't be stubborn and say, nope, that's okay. We're still going to do it. We're going to hit our head against the wall. We're just going to run duo a million times. We're just going to run nothing but inside-esque runs, inside-centric runs. Notre Dame needs to be balanced. They need to be efficient, but they need to attack this team where they are not good, and that is that you are much more athletic than this team.
Ryan, they ran the ball pretty well early against Clemson last year. What was the big reason for that? Because they ran a lot of that kind of, I don't even know what I want to call it. It's like a power. It's like a, I don't know. It's the 3-man counter that teams run. That's more of an outside hitting play, but it gets you kind of working for width, and it got those linebackers working laterally, and Notre Dame was able to gash them early, and then they kind of went away from it, and Clemson found some answers, and Notre Dame had no adjustments, which has been a run game concern that I've had, which is you come up with some really nice early schemes, and then once teams figured out, you don't have ability to do that. But I think the more diverse your run game is, the harder it is. Like, if your run game wrinkle is, hey, we're going to run counter this unique way, well, by the 5th time you've run it, they kind of know what it is. What are you doing off of that? And that's what Notre Dame has not really had. And then being able to okay, now they're doing this. What's our answer? And really good offensive coaches can kind of predict your answer. Well, this is what they do when teams do this, and we're going to have something off of that. Because as you mentioned, Ryan, one thing about this Stanford team, well, 2 things about the Stanford team. This is actually a pretty well-coached Stanford football team, in my opinion, on both sides of the ball. This is a very tough Stanford football team. Much different than what they were a couple years ago in the last few years of David Shaw, where, let's be honest, they were kind of soft in a lot of ways. Got gashed on the run, couldn't run the ball. They're getting better running the ball. Their run defense has got a lot better, and they're not doing it with great talent. They're doing it because they're smart, they're well coached, and they play hard. And if you just come out and inside zone, counter, inside zone at them all day with nothing to make them do anything this way, like you said, you're playing right into what they want to do, and you're not stressing them at all. Now it's just like, well, our dudes are better than your dudes. Okay, that's fine, but can't your dudes be better than their dudes while also doing some things that put them in some schematic and leverage binds? That's okay. That's allowed. And so if they can do that, I do think this offense has a chance to really destroy Stanford. I do. We sound a little skeptical because a lot of the things that they should do or need to do are not things they've necessarily done well so far this season. And so part of the reason we have these keys to victories, because a lot of this stuff is going to be about, okay, what answers did you find during the bye week? Yes, they work for Stanford, but there are also issues where your offense has struggled this season, because if you do that, then they should roll. And I don't want this to be a game, Ryan, where they dominate simply because they just have way better players. Like I felt like, remember when they blew them out in 2021? It's like that wasn't an overly impressive like game plan or anything. It just was like, your dudes are way better than their dudes, and you can do whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. You didn't actually play smart football. You just beat up a really bad team. I want to see this offense start to find some of those answers. So
if I could just say, the Notre Dame run game is like that one dude that plays you play rock, paper, scissors against, that just continues to do scissors every single time.
Yep.
You're like, brother, you got two other options there. I mean, if you play some versions, there's even more than three things that you could potentially pick. Like you're allowed to pick other things, right?
Yeah. So, and early in the game, Ryan, early when you're playing, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give him paper on the start. Okay, we both went scissors once. I got him with rock once. Okay, I know he's going rock now, so I'm gonna go paper. Shooting. And he's still scissors. So you get some wins, but eventually you figure it out, and you're like, okay, keep playing. All right, I keep winning because you're not, and that's kind of what that's a great point, man. I love that. All right, guys, anything else on offense before we head over to the defensive breakdown real quick? Okay, so before we get to the defense, fellas, do us a favor, everybody. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review, and of course, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So let's get over to the defense, guys, and this one is not going to be as long, and for a host of reasons, but really a big reason why is because with the Notre Dame defense, it's just, for the most part, guys, it's just keep doing what you're doing. It is a big part of what this defense has done. There's some things they need to clean up, but it's more so, okay, everybody has stuff to clean up early in the season. This is self-scouting. Okay, we're pretty good here. We're pretty good there. We're good here, but we're not great there. Let's get a little bit better at that. And it's going to be about adjusting those. Trevor, you had an article up today about the Notre Dame defense, and you look at the pass defense, you're like, wow, they're really good there. They're really good there. Oh, this randomly 64th in yards allowed per completion because you've given up a couple big plays. And then you look at it and you study, you're like, okay, well, yeah, well, like 52 of those yards came against your backups against Purdue, and another big play came against your backups. A bunch of chunk of those big couple big plays against Louisville came, or some of those yards came on when you were out of your base defense because you were more in a, let them kind of complete some ball. I mean, there's a lot of things you can look at, but there's some areas to clean up. So, we'll find out overall what they've done to kind of shore up some of those things. But for the most part, guys, it's just keep doing what you're doing. There are a couple areas that I think are key, and a couple of them are just basics. This is what you do against an inferior opponent. But there is one key, in my opinion, guys, that I think is very important for this game, and it's something that could allow Stanford to stay in this game. And that really is just, you got to contain Ashton Daniels as a runner, because when he gets going, and Ryan, I'll kick this to you because you and I have talked a lot about this. We talked about it last year. We talked about it. You and I talked about it this week. Trevor, you and I talked about it during the show this week. I really like Troy Taylor as an offensive coach, and they do so many different things that I have to imagine. I've only played linebacker one game in my career, Ryan, and that's because we played a team that went double tight, double wing, triple option, right? So nice. Playing cornerback was irrelevant for me in that game. You know what I mean? Like, there was no need. So I moved inside, played linebacker. That's it for me playing inside. Everything else I did was on defense was playing outside. But I got to imagine that when you watch all the different backfield, I mean, they're running just straight read zone. They'll do things where you've got a zone or an inside run look at with somebody else coming this way or somebody going that way. They'll do quick pitches. They'll do little orbit motion. They'll do speed option. They'll do all these different things that you got to be really disciplined as a linebacker. And a lot of it's geared towards, okay, you've got a kid that's not a great thrower. He's a pretty good athlete. He's a pretty tough runner. And when he gets his legs going as a runner and as a scrambler, that's when the offense looks pretty good. And all of a sudden, you're worried about him. And all of a sudden, Micah Ford is bouncing an inside zone out against Stanford because the linebackers of Stanford are just keying in on Ashton Daniels, and they're not focused on Micah Ford. And then boom, he bounces an outside zone run or an inside zone run. He bounces outside for a 20-yard gain. It's actually happened. Yeah. They get outside on an outside zone against Clemson. Why? Because the safeties and the linebackers were still looking at Ashton Daniels. So you've got to be able to contain him, in my opinion, in this game as a scrambler and as a runner, Ryan, because if Ashton Daniels can't get going with his legs, this offense really, and Trevor, you and I talked about this. I'll get Ryan's thoughts on this. If he can't get going with his legs, this offense has no chance if they're going to win, it's going to be like it was 2 years ago. It's going to be some 16-14 type of game because the Notre Dame offense didn't show up. That's really their only hope in this game of consistently moving the ball and putting points on the board is you're having trouble containing Ashton Daniels.
He's their leading rusher despite missing a football game, right? So, like, obviously they depend on his legs a whole lot in that offense. And I mean, people don't remember this, but 2 years ago, before he was the starter, when he was a true freshman, he was basically Justin Lamson at that point. Like, they brought him in as kind of a change of pace. You're going to run some quarterback power. You're going to do some read stuff. Like, you are basically the changeup at quarterback to Tanner McKee. And it worked. Like, he was pretty productive in that role overall.
Can I give you some context on that, Ryan? Because you talk about Justin Lamson. It is the role, but here's the difference. Justin Lamson this year is averaging 1.1 yards per carry. It's a little bit skewed because of short yardage runs and sacks last week. But last year, Justin Lamson was their leading rusher, 334 yards, 2.8 yards per carry. In 2022, in that same role, Ashton Daniels averaged 6.2 yards per carry with 3 touchdowns. So much more dynamic at it compared to what Justin Lamson's been. So you have that similar role. This guy doubled the other guy in yards per carry, which speaks to this kid's ability. And as you mentioned, this season, he's their leading rusher with 250 yards in only 4 games. He's averaging 62.5 yards rushing per game. He's averaging 5 yards a carry, despite an offense that ranks very low in sacks allowed, which takes away some of those rushing numbers.
And their offensive line is not very good, right? So, like, having the quarterback that can run the football outside of Micah Ford and the Chris Davis kid, and, you know, a couple of their other running backs, like, I think it's very beneficial to making that offensive line look a little bit better because it's not a good unit overall. I mean, it's the ultimate cheat code, and like they lean into it when he's healthy. I mean, obviously he missed last game, but like he's not just running off of scrambles, like he's running quarterback power, he's running quarterback read, he's running quarterback. I mean, they even ran, I forget what game it was, but like they're running like quarterback sweep with him, right? To get him outside the numbers a little bit as well. So this is a legitimately good athlete. And I mean, there's some reps where he's breaking tackles, working the sideline. Like he's just not a fast, quick, like athlete. Like he is also a physically pretty strong kid as well. So I like a lot of what I see from Ashton Daniels because I really think that the pace of how he plays the game is very beneficial to this run game. And that's only going to open things up ultimately, right? Like Notre Dame's going to come out and they're going to probably try to stop this run game pretty heavily, right? Whether Micah Ford's playing or he's not playing, the key is going to be let's stop the Stanford run game because having Ashton Daniels just be a drop back passer and throw into these wide receivers outside of Alec Ayo is not the or Ayo Manor, excuse me. Like that's not the most beneficial thing of all time. So I really think that for me, how are you able to stress this quarterback run game and this run game in general? If you're able to stifle them and to make them a one-dimensional thing, that is going to be really beneficial for the Notre Dame defense. And that all starts with the quarterback run game, Trevor, because that is the part of the game that is going to make Micah Ford better. It's going to make Chris Davis better. They have to be able to run the football. If they are not able to run the football with the quarterback, I think that really limits how this offense functions.
I agree. It's going to be interesting to see how Al Golden forms around it because you and I both know what his mindset is around running or around run defense, right? We got to be good, but our goal isn't to be the best. So I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic because despite having Alec Ayo Stanford is not going to really challenge you vertically down the field just based on what we've seen throughout their first, 5 games so far this season. So I'm going to be really interested to see what Al Golden does. I'm not saying, we're going to see Notre Dame load the box with 8 guys to try to stop the run this week. Not by any means, because Ayo is still a receiver who can hurt you over top if you're not disciplined and you're not looking out for it, right? So,
absolutely.
I mean, Ashton Daniels is going to have to be person number 1 that you identify in the run game because calling a spade, they don't have a single running back to shoot with a rushing touchdown through 5 games. Ashton Daniels, despite missing a game, Ashton Daniels leads the team in carries and in yards. So going to be interested to see what he does there.
That's a funny stat. I didn't even notice that when I was looking over the box score. That's like Trevor, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but I'm a Phillies fan. And I found out yesterday that Austin Hayes, who the Phillies traded for at the trade deadline, did not have a single walk in a Philly uniform since getting traded at the trade deadline through the entire second half of the season and the playoffs. Like, how is that physically possible? And that's kind of how I feel about that statistic.
Nuts.
It's crazy.
Nuts.
Absolutely crazy. One thing I know about Troy Taylor, too, as we kind of work through a little bit more of this offense, is he is very diverse in alignments. He's a guy that you're going to see 11 personnel. You're going to see 12 personnel. You're going to see motions. You're going to see trades. You're going to see play action. We already talked about the run game with Daniels, Ashton Daniels, where it's not going to look the same all the time. There's going to be quarterback power. There's going to be read. There's going to be different looks up front. You're going to see pullers at times. They are going to try to confuse you ultimately. They are going to do that. And one interesting tidbit I would say, or just thing to work through if you're Notre Dame defense, is while the linebackers have all had just incredible moments this year. Like Drake Bowen's had some huge flashes. Kingston Viliamoasa has had some huge flashes. Jay Nosberry. Like, I feel like all these linebackers have had big moments, Brian. But like the big thing that I would say is that this is the perfect team, a Troy Taylor-led offense that is going to try to hurt your eye discipline. They're going to try to get you in bad spots. And if you're Notre Dame second level, third level, just be in the right spot, man. Don't hurt yourself. No stupid things off of play action. No bad reads in the run game off of the read option, quarterback run game. Be in the right spot, because at the end of the day, you are the more talented team who should be able to stifle this offensive unit if you are in the right spot and you don't hurt yourself.
Ryan, Trevor and I talked about this earlier in the week. Troy Taylor's a smart dude. He's going to watch film of Notre Dame. He's going to watch what Louisville did early last week to leverage the linebackers in the throwing game. He's going to watch what Northern Illinois did with motion out of the backfield and bringing the jet sweep look with the wheel from your running back and things like that. And he's going to say these are really talented athletic linebackers, but they're young and they're going to make mistakes. I mean, even last week, as well as Kingston played, he had two huge mistakes, getting beat on the seam route, and then, of course, biting on an inside zone read where the quarterback takes it out the back door for a big gain. And he's going to say, okay, I need to stress those guys. I need to go after those guys and get them thinking, because if I let them play a downhill game, we're in trouble. But we're going to get those guys. We're going to slow those guys down as much as we can, Ryan. That's a great point. And it's the only hope Stanford really has, because it's like, look, guys, there's not a defense or an offense in America that if Notre Dame is playing their game is just going to consistently move the ball up and down the field in this defense. You're going to have to chunk play it. This is especially true for a team like Stanford. And the way that you chunk play it is, I mean, it's real simple, guys. You've got to create some big play opportunities. And if the way that you're best going to do that against Notre Dame is to get them to make mistakes. That's what you may have, Alec Ayomanor make a play or two against someone where he makes a great one-on-one, but he's not going to do that enough to be able to go out there and score. Like, he's not going to do to Notre Dame what he did to Travis Hunter a couple years ago, right? Who was coming off of being out for a month. And they said, okay, I know he's been hurting out for a month, but let's have him play 100 snaps in his first game back, right? I mean, Notre Dame's not going to do that. So you're going to have to create consistently chunk plays. And the way to do that is to get Notre Dame to play undisciplined football, so if Notre Dame, just like to your point, Ryan, just plays your game, just know your assignment, know your read key, don't get caught up in all the fluff. It's almost kind of like, I mean, Ryan, honestly, it's almost going to be mentally setting you up to play Navy in a couple weeks, which is, look, this is your read key. Yeah. Stick to your read key. Don't worry about all this other stuff going on. If your read key is this guy, then you play that guy, and then somebody else is going to count for that guy. Much different launching points, much different looks, but same philosophy of attacking this. I think it's going to be a good opportunity for them to do that.
We also hear all the time that Notre Dame is this team's Super Bowl, and there is this weird feel, I think, between both sides where I mean, there's a little bit of a rivalry here, quote unquote, because Notre Dame has been playing Stanford every single year, right? And they have a lot of values from the academic perspective. And I think Stanford, on the other side, because we always think about like Notre Dame's perspective of what a rival is. Stanford, I guarantee this is a game that they have on their schedule of like, if there's a time to pull out a trick play, if there's a time to do something a little bit out of the norm of what our offensive structure is, it's this game, right? So, like, I'm not saying they're going to pull out a double reverse pass or anything crazy like that, but like, I would not be shocked if there was something in the arsenal, something in the holster this week that they've been holding until this week, because this is a game that Stanford's going to come ready to play. I mean, I think we can't discount that. Like, yes, they're not a great football team. Notre Dame should win convincingly, but overall, like, this is a team that they view you as a little bit of a rival, and they're going to come and hopefully try to defeat you. Like, that's what they're going to try to do ultimately, right? So whether it's some type of trickeration or if it's a wrinkle in their offense, they're going to pull out something in this game that I think Notre Dame has not seen on film, because this is a game that they've been waiting for.
I agree. I was going to bring that up too, because if you go back through and you look at the games where Notre Dame has struggled, against Northern Illinois, against Miami of Ohio, there were big plays that the opposing team made early in the game. And Notre Dame has been a team on offense that shows once there is some adversity, once there is a little bit of, ooh, this wasn't a part of the plan, the team starts to sputter a little bit. Right against Northern Illinois, case could be made that they never recovered from that long 80-yard touchdown that Ontario Brown had. And against Miami of Ohio, I think there was a fumbled kickoff or an early fumble turnover in the start of the game. And then against Louisville, the offense did a good job rebounding from the early mistake. But the second that Riley Leonard got a little banged up and Jadarian Price fumbled the football, the team just wasn't the same after that, right? So yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Stanford looks to try to do something with misdirection or try to hit a big play really early.
You'd have to be a fool not to do that.
Right.
And Troy Taylor's not a fool. He didn't get here because he's a fool.
Hey man, if things don't work out for Troy Taylor, and you know, obviously I hope Mike Denbrock's here as long as possible, but if it doesn't work out for Troy Taylor and he ever wants to come be an offensive coordinator someday, like I'm open to it, man. That guy's got a nice scheme. I like his scheme a lot.
Last one, guys, and this is a key one here too. Is this is a team that does not protect the football very well. Stanford ranks 97th in the country in lost turnovers, which, when you consider the fact that they've only played 5 games, is not good. They've thrown 7 interceptions in 5 games. As good as Ashton Daniels is as a runner, he's not much of a thrower. He's got more interceptions so far this season than touchdowns. He'll hit some big plays, but he's just not if he's playing in the National Football League, it's at another position. It's not a quarterback. Very different quarterback than the kid that they had 2 years ago that led them to a victory over Notre Dame. Right, exactly. And so but here's the thing. They've only lost 2 fumbles, fellas, but they rank 99th in the country in fumbles, like balls that hit the ground. They've had like 9 balls, right? 9 that have hit the ground. They've lost 2. So the last key is this: get the ball. I mean, you want to put this team away early. The offense has got to do their thing and all that, but get the ball. They're, if you're aggressive, and what does that mean? Okay, Trevor, number one, obviously when the ball's on the ground, it's thrown up, you go get it. That's the simple part. But part of get the ball is do things to then force them into those situations. Don't sit back and wait. Be aggressive. Shoot gaps. Do what you do. Come out playing fast, hitting hard. This quarterback's got a long delivery, and he's not a great decision maker. Drive on the ball. Put it up in the air. Make those type of plays. Defensive linemen, they're going to throw a lot of quick game. Get your hands up, right? Run game wise, put them in some bad situations where you get some early down stops that force them to be in obvious throwing downs, because you know what? You're going to get a chance to get the ball. So there should be, if Notre Dame plays hard in this game, if this defense is locked in and focused, there will be chances for them to get the football. And they're going to need to, and that's how you really bury this team. Yes, you make your stops, but give your offense a short field. Give your offense, hey, you know what? You guys just got on them. We're going to get the ball back and make their defense go right back on the field. Those are all parts of it, guys. The ball will get put up in positions. If you play hard and you play well, the ball will get put in positions where you can get it, and now it's up to you. Go get it. That's my final key on defense for Notre Dame.
Well, it's really great that Notre Dame is so good at scooping up fumbles. It's really good that is part of their strengths, obviously, in jest there. But Notre Dame has obviously been increasingly better the last couple of years, especially of creating turnovers in the passing game off of interceptions. So, this kid has thrown 6 interceptions himself in 4 games. They've thrown 7 as a team so far, and the 2 lost fumbles. I mean, they were going to – I actually think – and we were talking about this a little bit, Brian, before the show, is that I actually don't hate this offense in the sense of I think they can move the ball. Like, Stanford can move the ball pretty well. It's just they shoot themselves in the foot so often, man. It's just like missed opportunity, fumble, interception. Like, they just shoot themselves in the foot constantly. Notre Dame has become, again, increasingly better at forcing turnovers the last couple of years. So when they put an opportunity to put a ball out there, Notre Dame needs to capitalize, especially when your offense has been so up and down. If you're Notre Dame, giving them short fields is so advantageous to helping the other side of the football as well. So yes, when the ball is there to make a play, Christian Gray, I don't know if you want to stick him on the hands this week, man. Like, I don't know what you got to do, brother, but a couple more turnovers would be great.
Yeah.
Apparently, the lost fumbles, Trevor, is my fault because I haven't spoke on it all season until the Louisville game when they had a fumble. Louisville had fumbled the kickoff, and Notre Dame didn't fall on it. Louisville takes over inside their own 10, and I looked at Vince and I said, man, this team does not know how to recover a fumble. Very next play, Leonard Moore comes from behind on Tyler Shuck, knocks the ball out. Jaden Osbury recovers it. So what I'm going to do, it was a great play. Yes, and great hustle by Jaden Osbury as well. So before every series, I'm going to look over at Sean Stiers because Vince won't be at the game this weekend because his son's got a recruiting visit this weekend. And I'm going to look over at him and say, this team does not know how to recover fumbles, and just see if I can kind of keep that good mojo working here for the Notre Dame defense. Any last keys for the defense, fellas, before we get going?
I just think that last one is the biggest key for me because, again, I think there's going to be moments where your Notre Dame fans could be a little bit frustrated defensively, not in that they're giving up these huge plays, but it's just like, oh man, Stanford's like getting a couple first downs here, right, in this drive. And then there's going to be a play where Ashton Daniels puts the ball in harm's way. There's going to be a fumble, whatever it is. And Notre Dame needs to capitalize on those types of plays because they've been a little bit bend or don't break in certain games this year, which is fine as long as when that breaking point happens, you capitalize and you force a turnover or you force a big stop, right? So this is a team that if you shut them down early, it's going to be very demoralizing to them, especially when, like, Ashton Daniels was apparently good to go last week if they needed him to go, but they didn't want to force him back into action. I expect him to be pretty close to 100% in this football game overall as a player. So he's dangerous. Alec Ayo Manor is dangerous if you let them be dangerous. So when there is a play out there, Notre Dame needs to make it and stifle this team as far as being a cohesive unit. Occasional big play is cool or whatever, but like we always talk about sustainability, if Stanford can't consistently move the ball because they're putting the ball in harm's way, then that obviously lends to Notre Dame's favor.
By the way, he's thrown 5 picks in his last 2 games. Daniels has.
Yep.
He threw 3 against Stanford and 2 against Syracuse, and then they had 2 more turnovers this past weekend in the loss to Virginia Tech. So, Trevor,
at least they finally beat Sacramento State, man. They got that monkey off the back.
Yeah. Any last keys to think that you're focused on defense, Trevor?
Yeah, this one's a little bit more minute. Ryan kind of touched on it a little bit, but it was Notre Dame has kind of had that bend but don't break mentality. And for me, some of that goes into perform well on second down, please. I think Notre Dame does a relatively decent job of getting off the field on third down. Just this is more eye test, but there are so many times where I see it, Notre Dame gets a good stop on first down. It's 2nd and 9, and then before you know it, it's 3rd and 2 because there's just not a chunk play per se, but it gets them into 3rd and manageable from time to time. So a little bit smaller, but I think just being consistent 1st through 3rd down is going to be huge for them and not allowing, and getting comfortable with, hey, we just got a good stop on first down. We can kind of take our foot off the gas for a second.
All right, fellas, that's going to do it for this segment of the show. We're going to do predictions next. But remember, folks, while you're here, while we transition into predictions, go ahead and hit that like button. You see it down there? There's that thumbs up sign. Hit the thumbs up sign, not the thumbs down sign, but the thumbs up sign. And make sure that you're subscribed to our channel. So now the fun part, fellas. We spent the week breaking down the film. We've all watched film of Stanford. We've watched a lot. Some things were like, that's so bad. And some things like, that's actually pretty good. Not too bad. So we've broken down the film. We've looked at the numbers. We've looked at the matchups. And now it is time to make our predictions. So we're going to have some fun with that, guys. You all know the drill. You give your score prediction, and you talk to me about how you see the game playing out. Then I'm going to follow up some questions on game balls. So, Trevor, we're going to start things off with you. First of all, what is your score prediction for this game, and how do you see this game playing out?
Final score prediction that I have is Notre Dame winning 38-10. And I do think that Stanford's final touchdown is going to come later in the game once it has been already very securely put away. I think that Notre Dame finally starts to open up the passing game a little bit. And that's not me saying that it's going to be completely solved after one game against a really bad Stanford defense. But to what we alluded to earlier in the show, I think Notre Dame is going to start implementing things, and we're going to start seeing things out of this passing game between pass protection, receivers, quarterback combined that we were starting to expect to see or wanting to see earlier in the season. I think that is going to help open up the run game. Riley Leonard is, like Brian, you and I talked about before, he's going to become more of a complement to the rushing attack for Notre Dame, not the focal point. And I think we're going to start to see what this offense was meant to be a couple weeks ago.
So, Trevor, if the game plays out the way that you think it's going to play out, who gets your game balls for the offense?
Game ball for the offense for me is going to go to Riley Leonard because I think he finally has his first complete game as a passer. We've mentioned it before, and he has one game against Purdue where he's hitting the layups. He has the game against Miami of Ohio where he's taking deep shots down the field. And if it weren't for a handful of DPIs, they would have been pretty accurate balls as well. I think we finally are going to see a complete game from Riley Leonard, and I would give him my game ball.
I sure hope so. That would be very much needed. How about the defense, Trevor? So you said the 38-10. They score late. Okay, so Notre Dame as a whole on defense is going to play well. Who do you have as being the best of the best? Who are you giving your defensive game ball to?
Defensive game ball for me is going to go to, and I haven't really decided yet, but it's going to be one of the interior defensive linemen. I think they're going to build off of their performance against Louisville, which was on paper their best performance so far of the season. And I think they're really going to start, they're going to blow the doors open as to why they decided to come back to Notre Dame. They're going to do a good job getting pressure on the interior on Ashton Daniels. I could see a sack or two coming from one of the two veterans on the interior. So I haven't decided which one it's going to be yet. Just for the sake of saying I'm going to give somebody a game ball, I would say it goes to Howard Cross.
I'm okay with that. I mean, I think that's fair. It's like, look, I know what position's going to dominate. I'm just not sure which guy. I can accept that. I'll allow it. I'll allow it, Trevor.
Appreciate it.
All right. What's the one thing you're most concerned about in this matchup, which is going to keep this game from being what you think it's going to be?
The offensive commitment to opening up their scheme overall. We talked about it a lot this show. I don't want Notre Dame from a running standpoint to just say, you know what, we're just going to run into the teeth of the defense and wait on 4 or 24 to bust one open. I don't want it to be that. Pass protection is going to be another one. Is if you're going to commit to the offensive line that you had against Louisville and they come out and are still performing essentially the same and there's no improvement, those are the two big things that I see being the main contributing factor to Notre Dame not putting up 38 offensive points.
Yeah, the offensive line is so important. I have an article at irishbreakdown.com, by the way, for where I've talked about, like, look, it was more so big picture second half of the year as opposed to just Stanford specifically. But if this offense is going to take off, it has to start there. It's not the only issue. There are other things that have to get addressed, but they can't be fixed and addressed if that part of the team doesn't play well. So that's a big one. So, Mr. Roberts, let's turn to you. Give me your score prediction and how you see this game playing out.
I have the Irish winning 34-13 in this football game against Stanford. I believe that Notre Dame actually is going to come out. Trevor, we see this very similarly. I think that Notre Dame is going to come out and actually come out throwing the football a little bit and create a couple big plays. I think that is going to be in the first couple of drives of the game. And Notre Dame is going to get up pretty big in this one. I could see them being up 28-7 or something in that ballpark. But my hesitation to making this a 40-something to 10 or 50-something to 10 is that I just think that Notre Dame is going to get up and they're just going to kind of sit on the football a little bit, right? And they're going to kind of move it a little bit more at a slower pace. And I just think that they're going to play a little bit more of that methodical feel. I think that we've kind of seen that outside of the Purdue game. Like, that's just kind of what Notre Dame does, you know, as far as like they just get into these lulls where they're okay. Let's play defense. Let's control the ball. Let's run the clock. We're good here. And I think that for me, but defensively, I think that 13 points is going to be even a little bit more skewed because I do think that they have the chance to have a dominant performance. I do think that Stanford can move the ball at times against Notre Dame, but I think that we are going to see a turnover or two. I think that we're going to see a team that can capitalize on that momentum. So 34-13, it's a more dominant performance than what that final score says because I think that Notre Dame comes out hot and they just kind of sit on the football and they play defense and they get to the end of the game is kind of how I'm looking at this football game.
I only have one thing to add to that, Ryan.
Yep.
I just have felt like in his 2 years so far, now going to his third year, that when Marcus Freeman has a game that is personal for him for some reason or another, he tends to not take his foot off the gas. Like, I don't know, a few weeks ago when they played a team that he fired him when he was the defensive coordinator, he put his third string quarterback in the game and they're still throwing bombs. You know what I mean? And I kind of view Stanford as that way for Notre Dame, especially since Stanford is not on the schedule next year. There's no need to kind of respect the rivalry anymore. I have a feeling that if they come out of this game, if they come out like you said, I think Mike Denbrock wants this as well. Like, we need a game where offensively we put pedal to the metal and really put this team away. And see now if they do what you say, I'll be disappointed as far as just like, you know, let's call off the dog. Hey, no, calling off the dogs for me as a coach is you put your backups in. Doesn't mean you change the way you call plays. You put Steve Angeli in the game, let him run the offense the way you normally would do it. You want to put Kenny Minchey in the game, let him run the offense the way you would normally do it, just like they did against Purdue. And I loved that. That's how I grew up, you know, respecting the heck out of Bobby Bass's thing. Like, these kids practice hard. I'm putting my backup and a quarterback in the game. I need to let them run the offense. I really hope they do that. It would be a little disappointing if they do. I understood why they did it against Louisville. I'd be less understanding of it against Stanford, to be honest with you. Let's talk game balls, Ryan. If Notre Dame wins this game the way that you think they're going to win this game, so you're going 34-13 and it's not really that close. You think it's going to look more convincing than the score is. But if the game plays out the way that you think, who gets your offensive game ball?
Even though I think that there's going to be some explosive plays in the passing game early, I think it's still going to be Jeremiah Love, and I wouldn't be shocked if one of those explosive plays is off a wheel where you are able to put him against one of these linebackers in coverage. Because if you get Bernadette or you get Tristan Sinclair in coverage, I think that I will take Jeremiah Love in that matchup. 9 out of 10 times. I was going to say 9 out of 10 to be nice, but I'll take him every time where there's an accurately thrown football, right? So I think that he's going to create a couple big plays. And because, like, those linebackers are good players, but that is where, if we're talking about the athleticism comparison to Notre Dame, like, that might be one of the biggest glaring issues for them, is that, like, those linebackers just can't work against Jeremiah Love in space a ton. So I hope we get Jeremiah Love off tackle. I hope we get Jeremiah Love in the passing game. I'm going with this is a game where we get Jeremiah Love 150 plus all-purpose yards in this game and a couple of touchdowns. Feed the big dog, number 4.
All right, defense you think is going to have a pretty good day, not necessarily an elite day, but a good day. The defense plays the way that you think it will, Ryan. Who's getting your game ball on that side of the ball?
Bryce Young breakout, 2 sacks, couple tackles for loss, and he now gives you a little bit more flexibility with his breakout to maybe RJ Oben could play a little Viper at times if we need him to. Maybe Joshua Burnham could play even more reps at Viper than maybe what they're intending to. So I think that breakout is more me hoping for the future, because I think if one of those big ends does break out, especially Bryce Young, then I think that you now have a little bit more flexibility, especially since the Viper position is obviously depleted due to injury a little bit.
I can dig that, Ryan. I like that. I've done a couple wishful thinking predictions this year as well, so I dig that. And if you watch the Louisville game, and I'm saying this not to you, I'm saying this to sort of a setup to the point, he's starting to flash a little bit. Like, and I'm curious if you see it the way that Trevor and I talked about the other day. Like, first couple times he's on the field, he looked lost. He looked like a true freshman to know what he's doing. In Northern Illinois game, little bit against Purdue, where he had some flashy plays, but it was just based on God-given ability. He actually had a couple moves against Louisville. Like, there was one, I think he did an outside rush. The guy went outside and he just ripped inside of him and drilled the corner. I'm like, oh, okay, Bryce Young starting to figure it out. This is going to be good. And then he has a bye week to build on that, Ryan. So, I mean, I know you're saying it's wishful thinking and you hope it's going to happen, but there's evidence that from this most recent game to make you think that this could happen for him coming out of this game.
It's going to happen at some point, because if you've been around Bryce, I remember when I was down in San Antonio at the All-American Bowl last year, Brian, and like I'm watching him after practice where he is clearly one of the more athletic defensive linemen. And he flashed all practice after a game while all the other players are doing interviews or walking to the bus and all that type of stuff. He's working near the goalpost and just doing extra pass rush moves and working on his hands, right? Like this kid's a worker. There's no doubt about that. So it's going to happen at some point. I hope it happens this week again, because like again, with Jordan Matelho and Boubacar Traore out now, you need to supplement some reps at Viper somehow. And I think if a guy like a Bryce Young breaks out and takes on a heavy workload at the big end position, then you can now move guys over to Viper a little bit more. And you can kind of do a little bit of double duty, because you're going to need it down the stretch, because I am worried about Viper right now, because not that Junior Tuihalamaka is not a good football player, not that Logan Thomas isn't incredibly talented, but where's the pass rush coming from right now without Boubacar Traore in the football game? So that's wishful thinking for sure, but I think Bryce Young has the temperament and the athleticism, obviously, to have that type of breakout in a game.
Yeah, they're good football players, but there's not a lot of teams that can lose their first 2 starting defensive ends and just expect to have an elite pass rush from that position. I mean, it's unfair to ask that. If it happens, great, and it speaks volumes about the job that they're doing developing that position, but it's hard to do that. It really is. It really is. So Ryan, when I and Trevor, I'm going to give you mine. I'm actually going 41-13. So, and I actually think Stanford will get a late score. I think it might be a field goal. I could see Stanford kind of punching one in the first half. Maybe getting a big play and then getting a drive where they get a touchdown. Coming out of the break, sometimes defensively you can lose a little bit of your rhythm early on and maybe give a big play. And if that happens for Notre Dame, I think that's probably going to be bad news for Stanford, because I think that's going to kind of wake the defense up and get them to play really hard. But I really think this offense is going to roll in this game, guys. I do. I think we're finally going to see some big plays in the pass game. This is kind of where you were talking about. It's more wishful thinking. I'm predicting what should happen more so than what will happen, because I have no clue what this offense is going to do. We just don't know. But you just look at it and some of the things I've heard about how the week of practice has gone the last 2 weeks and just that. You watch the last 2 games, guys, and you're just like, man, they are just a play here, or a guy there, a guy there. If this guy just does his protection, Riley wanted that throw, he wanted it, but he couldn't get to it. They're close. They're a lot closer, I think, than maybe we realize and maybe we've discussed. And I think in this game they kind of figure it out and start to show it. 41 points against this Stanford team is not a national title, here we come type of performance, but it's a step in the right direction. I think if they go 50+ against this team, that says, okay, this team is maybe starting to figure it out, because this isn't a very good Stanford defense, but it's a scrappy Stanford defense. And it's a Stanford defense that lacks athleticism, but it's still more athletic than what Purdue's was. And so I think that they'll put up a little bit more of a fight than Purdue did defensively. But if Notre Dame comes out and starts fast, I think everything else kind of falls into place and it's a blowout. My player of the game, I'm actually going to go with I'm going to kind of go your route, Trevor, and I don't have a guy in mind because I don't know who that's going to be, but I think somebody's going to break out in the pass game, whether it's Mitchell Evans or Eli Raridan at tight end, whether it's one of the outside receivers, Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, KK Smith, Jaden Thomas, whether it's a slot guy, Jaden Greathouse, somebody like that. And Trevor, you and I talked about yesterday. I mean, I know who I would probably best bet would be Greathouse or Bo Collins, because we've seen it a little bit. I would actually be kind of happy if it wasn't one of them and it was actually a Chris Mitchell or a KK Smith. Maybe they move Jaden Harrison outside, which is what I would do, honestly. At times is put him outside and let him use his speed and some different type of looks. Because we've seen Greathouse make money plays this year. We've seen Bo Collins make money plays this year. We've seen the Z position do almost nothing this season of any type of impact and value. It'd be nice to kind of have that position breakout against a secondary that honestly you should get a breakout performance. And so part of it's like, hey, if you can't break out this game, like we talked about yesterday, Trevor, I don't know when that pass game breakout happens.
Yep.
Defensively, I honestly think this is going to be a game where one of the safeties is going to have a nutty game. A couple picks, a couple tackles for loss, a forced fumble, because if you guys are correct in your predictions about Bryce Young having a performance and getting Josh Burnham back helps, and Trevor, you talked about the interior defensive line playing well, there's going to be some balls thrown up for grabs, and whether it's Xavier Watts or Don Schuler, Christian Gray, Benjamin, somebody. And I think more so the safeties, and I would say safeties and nickel would be in that conversation. Somebody's going to have a couple turnovers and have a couple big play opportunities at that position. And I also think the safeties are going to be very important in making the linebackers right when they're wrong. And you guys know what I mean by that. But then also they're going to be a very big key to stopping the run game, especially the support stuff, the alley stuff. So I think the safeties are going to be very important in this game from stopping the run standpoint, stopping the quarterback in space standpoint. And then I think they're going to get chances to make some big plays in the pass game. So that's why I'm going with the safeties for my players of the game. Ryan, I was going to ask you, I didn't get a chance to ask you this. What's the one thing that you're most concerned about in regard to your prediction not coming true in this game being more competitive than it should be?
Coming out flat. I mean, I think that's been the crux to this team over the last couple of years, right? Is that when they don't play well, you usually know it very early on in the football game. Like usually within the first couple minutes, you're like, uh-oh. Or sometimes even before the football game starts, which is even more troubling. But regardless, I think that if they come out flat, there is, especially off of a bye where you're supposed to have a bunch of answers, we're still dealing with 18 to 23-year-old kids, right? We're like, we don't talk about this enough, but like in the NFL, if a team comes out flat, a lot of times teams come back because they are adults, like they are grown men. They're a little bit more mature in bouncing back from things. College kids are not the same. Ultimately, they're not. That's why there's so much more. You start out flat and then you get rolled because you just can't mentally come back from that overall, right? So I really am I wouldn't say worried, but I am a little bit I'm going to watch to see what the pulse of this team is coming out. Are they fiery? Are they aggressive? Or are they just kind of meandering out of the bye week with just kind of expecting to win? If that is the latter, then I don't think that Stanford's going to win this football game by any stretch, but like, could they keep it close for a while because Notre Dame just was not ready to play to begin the game? It's always a concern until it's not.
That's where I'm at, Ryan. That's it. It's just Notre Dame comes out not ready to play. And just thinking they're going to roll the ball out in this. Notre Dame has to learn nobody fears you right now. You have not forced anyone to fear you right now. You've got to earn that. And Stanford's not going to be afraid of you. They had a lead on you late in the second quarter last year. They beat you 2 years ago. And this is a better Stanford team than, in my opinion, either one of those two teams. They're not great, but they're better than this. So I agree with you guys. Well, fellas, that's going to do it for this part of the show. Don't go anywhere, everybody. These two guys are going to go somewhere, but I have a feeling they're going to still be watching too, because Bill Bender is going to join from Sporting News is going to join me next. And we're going to be previewing what is going to be a fun weekend of college football. I'm very envious of you two because you're going to be sitting at home at noon watching those games while I'm traveling over to the stadium and getting ready to work and all that kind of good stuff. It's going to be a really fun weekend of games. Unfortunately, the 3:30 window is probably the best window. So there's going to be some really good games going on while Notre Dame is playing as well. So thank you, fellas, for being with me. Appreciate y'all both very much. Hopefully that, the things we talk about, we start to see it and this team comes out of the break rocking and rolling. So Ryan and Trevor, thank y'all both, folks. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And if you've not done so, check out the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You can find Ryan. You see it right there, guys, at Rise and Draft. And you can find his columns at A to Z Sports. And, of course, Trevor, you can find all his stuff at Irish Breakdown. So I've got irishbreakdown.com, and you can see Trevor's work. He has an article breaking down the Notre Dame defense statistically and where it is right now as we head into the second half of the season. So thanks for being with me, fellas. We'll talk to y'all again very soon. So it looks like Bill Bender, for some reason, just fell out of here. There he is. All right. Hey, Bill, how are you, man?
I didn't have the hardwire plugged in, but
That's
at least
all
I
good.
wasn't on mute this time. So
hey, you know what? It's a step in the right direction.
One of these days
It's a
we will
step
get
in the right
this.
direction.
One of these days we'll get the entrance right.
Well, you know what? I think the content is so good, Bill. I think people kind of forget about what it looks like after that. And man, I tell you what, it's funny, Bill. You and I. First of all, how you doing? Everybody good over there in Central Ohio? You guys ready to roll for another great weekend of football?
I think so. Yeah, we definitely had a couple weeks left in football season. Have an exciting time. We have a lot of games to talk about today.
Yes,
Excited. So it'll be a good weekend. I don't know if we can replicate the upsets of last weekend, but certainly whenever you think that, you know what breaks loose, and that's what happened last weekend.
Yep. It's interesting, Bill, because you look at the games we predicted and the games we talked about. There's some games you're like, on paper, this should not be a game, the Tennessee-Arkansas game. But as I said last week, we're going to find out what kind of team Tennessee is right now. And as we found, there's a lot of flawed teams in college football right now. A lot of flawed teams in college football.
Yeah, you texted me about that last week, and I didn't – I compared their loss to the Cardinals losing to the 49ers. Or the 49ers losing to the Cardinals, I'm sorry, last weekend, and I made this joke a few times that the SEC, they publicize losses better than any conference in the country. They pass it off as, it's NFL-like. You can't go to Vandy and expect to win if you don't play well. You can't go to Arkansas. But you called that one. That was one that you called very well. Had somebody else text me. I called Vanderbilt.
I did not at all.
That wasn't you.
That one. No,
I had another friend text me and say they called Vanderbilt. I was like, you didn't call. Nobody called that.
Give
Nobody
me evidence. Show me proof where you put that on paper or said somewhere that you called Vanderbilt.
If I had Vanderbilt in the Sporting News picks, we could claim that.
Yeah.
But no, you didn't claim. You could call close game. You didn't call win.
Sure. Because it is a scrappier Vanderbilt team. There's no doubt about that. So, Bill, we've got a lot of games we're going to break down this weekend. We're going to talk about a couple games kind of quickly. It's potential upset Saturday in the Big 12, which we'll dive into. We could see a major shakeup in the Big 12, or a couple teams have a chance to start putting some distance between themselves and the rest of the conference. So it's going to be a shakeup Saturday in the Big 12. And then, of course, there's 4 huge games this weekend, Trevor. Bill, 3 games between ranked opponents, and then 1 game between a team that is ranked in the top 5 and a team that had been ranked all season until last weekend when they lost last second. So we're going to preview all those today, Bill, and I'm looking forward to it. First game I want to look at, Bill, is a very interesting game down in between Florida and Tennessee. Now, obviously on paper, this is a game that should not be close. It's a night game. It's a Neyland Stadium. But I look at this Tennessee team, Bill, and I think they're scrambling a little bit. They didn't play real well offensively against Oklahoma. Their defense played great. Their defense has really played well last week, too. They didn't lose that game because of their defense. But their offense, they've kind of found some flaws. Now, I don't think this is a game where Florida is going to win, but I think Florida understands what's at stake. This is an opportunity to sort of salvage your season, to salvage your coach. And for Billy Napier, I mean, the reason this game's like on paper, this should be a blowout win for Tennessee. Can we both agree on that? Like, they talent-wise are a much better football team than Florida. The concern I have is, where is this team at psychologically after the loss last week? Some teams bounce back with a vengeance. Some teams, it kind of, it starts a decline. Florida State is that way.
Yeah.
With Florida, it's this thing where if you're Billy Napier, Bill, here's the concern I have for Tennessee. You've got nothing to lose. Double reverse throw. I mean, you got nothing to lose, bro. This is a chance for you to save your career at Florida. And if you lose this game, I think it's your last chance to really kind of salvage things. If he's 4-2 coming out of the start to the season, he's got a chance to take them to bowl game and maybe save their season. For Tennessee, the loss last weekend sucked, but in a lot of ways, Bill, Tennessee still controls their own destiny moving forward. You've got Florida this weekend. You got Bama at home next weekend. You do play Georgia on the road, but outside of that, your schedule's UK at home, Mississippi State at home, UTEP, and at Vandy. You bounce back and win this game, you're still in a lot of ways in control of your own destiny going out into the season.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Florida's playing a little bit better quietly. Graham Mertz, their quarterbacks the last 2 weeks, 85.9 completion percentage. Yeah, some of it's competition, but I mean, it's not like Mississippi State and UCF. That's not Mercer. Those are at least Power 4 opponents. So I'm guilty of one thing with games like this. You give in to the emotion of the rivalry, and you just – there's another game we'll talk about later that I'm going to do the same thing, is you assume it will be close based on past results. Track record's pretty consistent that these two play close games. And Florida, like you said, catching Tennessee probably at the right time. I think they've built some positive momentum. I mean, and here's the pressure point now. Florida owns this series.
Yes.
Looking at last 7 years, they've won most of those games. I guess they haven't been as close as I thought. I'm looking at the scores right now. A bunch of double-digit games with the exception of 2022. But 2022, Tennessee was loaded, had Hendon Hooker, was supposed to just blow the doors off Florida. It was a 38-33 game. So I think if you're telling me 15 points, you're going to give me that many, I'm almost looking at that as a freebie. But, again, guilty of doing that on games like this.
Bill, I mean, you look at this game and you talk about how bad Florida is, and they've struggled under Billy Napier and all those type of things. And, Josh Heupel's doing some really good things at Tennessee. He's 1-2 against Florida.
Right.
And his 2 losses were both by double digits. His first loss in 2021, they lost by 24. And then last year they lost to Florida by 13. Since 2005, going all the way back, starting in 2005, Florida is 17-2 against Tennessee. The wins for Tennessee came 2 years ago in 2016. And 2 years ago, Florida wasn't very good. Tennessee was really good, and they struggled. I mean, they won by 5. I think this game is not going to be competitive, honestly. I think Tennessee is going to come out and roll this one because I think they're going to respond well, and they have a defense, which is different than what they've had in past years. But if they don't, then we're going to realize that Tennessee is a team that is one of those early season fool's gold teams. Because if they can't bury Florida, because here's the fear. You're coming off the loss last weekend, and you got Bama coming up next weekend. Are you caught peeking in both directions and not looking at what's right in front of you? That's the danger zone for Tennessee. If they can really lock in on this game, then I think they'll be fine and win. And when I say convincingly, I mean minimum 2 touchdowns. I'm not saying they're going to win by 40, but a minimum 2 touchdowns where they're clearly the better team.
I had 31-17.
So we're there. We're saying.
I mean, but that's and again, Florida maybe can hang around and keep it in the neighborhood. But I mean, if Graham Mertz plays well and they get a couple turnovers and they are playing with a little confidence, if Tennessee blows the doors off them, we go back to is Billy Napier getting fired. But again, emotion of the rivalry, I think the Gators hang around for a while.
Yep, I'm with you. So the other game I think is very interesting, and we'll be brief about this one. This is Louisville at Virginia. And this is a game not getting talked a lot about for good reasons. It's not a matchup of 2 great football teams, but Louisville's in a unique situation, Bill, because they're in a must-win situation. They've now lost 2 games in a row. Fortunately for them, only one of them was a league game. They've got to get back on track. And when you look at what their schedule is coming down the road, they've got Miami the next week, and then at BC, and then at Clemson, and then at Stanford, home against Pitt, at Kentucky. If they don't bounce back and win this game on the road against Virginia, they could spiral. And that's always a fear that I have with teams that are primarily built on the portal, is you may not have the same buy-in when things don't go well as we've seen in the past. So that's a fear. And then for Virginia, they're a sneaky 4-1 football team right now, Bill, that nobody's really talking about. And I understand they're not sexy, but they went on the road and beat Wake Forest. They smashed Coastal Carolina on the road, and they're coming off of a very convincing quality win over Virginia or BC, where it looked like BC was going to win this one. And in the fourth quarter, UVA just put them away with 18 unanswered points. And so we're sitting here looking at UVA saying, hold on a second. UVA is 4-1, and they're 4-1 against a schedule where they've already earned 2 Power 4 wins. Okay, maybe Tony Elliott's getting it figured out, or it could just be a little bit of fool's gold and you're about to get smacked by Louisville. I'm very curious to see where the psyche is going to be for Louisville. And if it's bad, Virginia could maybe. And for Notre Dame, it's like, I don't know what's better for Notre Dame. For Louisville, for Virginia to win and keep winning so you can beat a ranked team, or for Louisville to get back on track, and then you kind of have that one. I think a better chance of Louisville getting on track and winning a lot than for UVA to keep this rolling. But it's going to be an interesting game. Great opportunity for both teams.
Yeah, and turnovers. Oh, by the way, Arrow guy on the comments, I live in Pickerington. So, and my son that's why I have the hat on. It's 1, it's a comfortable hat. 2, my son plays on the lacrosse team here. And 3, as you know, 256 has 100 stoplights. Anybody, if you ever get to Pickerington, Brian, you will sit in traffic for 40 minutes. Now, Louisville, problem is they can't run the ball.
Right.
3.3 yards per carry the last 3 games against real competition. They missed Jordan and Grando. Those were NFL running backs. Those were the guys that kind of got on Notre Dame a little bit last year, not last week.
Their line's not as good as it was last year either.
Correct. So they couldn't. Maybe that's the problem. SMU took it to them. We'll talk more about SMU as the season goes on because they're going to factor in that race late in the season. And Virginia's turnovers. They haven't committed a turnover in the last 2 games. They committed 4 against Maryland. So, that it adds up. I don't know if it's fool's gold or law of averages or what, but between those games, all their games, they're even in turnovers. So if they turn the ball over a lot, it's going to be really bad. If they don't, they'll be in it. Maybe closer than we expect here.
It's gonna be fast. I feel this is what games like this are harder to pick than they used to be because we have so many teams that are just portal dominant. Like back in the day, I'd have said, "Oh, this team is going to have this and it's going to be that," but I don't know how this team is going to mentally respond from Louisville. If they respond well, and I hope that they do, I don't think this game's going to be overly close. I think this is the thing that's interesting though. This is a pretty good Virginia defense, Bill. I mean, you mentioned the loss to Maryland. They turned the ball over 4 times. They only gave up 27 points in the game, and a lot of that was driven by turnovers in that game. So their run defense has been pretty solid all season. They've just got to do a better job protecting the football. And, they were up in that game 13-7 at halftime against Maryland, and Maryland outscored them by 10 in the second half. So it's going to be a very fascinating game to look at in this one. Do you have a score prediction for this game?
I didn't, but I'll give you one. I think, Louisville 30-21. Something like that. I think they'll still win and bounce back, and I like their team, but they need to establish a little bit more of a running game. And they're still in the ACC hunt with the non-con loss. They'll be fine.
I don't think this game is going to end up being super, super close. I think Louisville's going to win by 10 points, and I think a big reason for that is, Louisville's problem is they can't stop the pass all that effectively, and I don't know that Virginia's a team that. They're better throwing the football than I thought they would be, but they're not necessarily, they're not SMU throwing the football. Malachi Field's a really good player, but, we'll see how it goes. So let's look at the next game, Bill, or the next segment of this show, which is going to be – so those are some very interesting prove-it games this weekend, I think is what it is. Louisville, how do they bounce back from a loss? How does Tennessee bounce back from a loss? Tony Elliott came into the season a little bit on the hot seat after some down years. So did Billy Napier. These are chances for them to kind of salvage their season. So very interesting games. The other segment that I want to get into, Bill, is there are 3 really intriguing games in the Big 12 this weekend that could say, okay, the best teams in the league are going to show themselves and separate themselves this weekend, or the Big 12 is about to get in some serious chaos depending on how this season goes. And there's really a 4th game we could add to that too, but there's 3 I'm especially looking at. The first one that we could also talk about is Arizona at BYU. BYU's don't even get me started on how Iowa State's ranked ahead of BYU. I have no clue how that's even a thing right now when you look at the resumes of the 2 teams. BYU has 2 wins over teams currently ranked in the top 25. Iowa State has none, but that's a different conversation for a different day, Bill. That's an interesting game. Do they overlook Arizona, who's still a sneaky, not a sneaky team, but a dangerous team for other teams in the Big 12, even though they're not as good. But the 3 that I want to focus on, Bill, first of all, we'll start with the Friday night game. Number 16 Utah, who's 4-1 at Arizona State, who is again another one of those. There's a few of these, Bill, these sneaky 4-1, 5-0 teams like Army, Navy. That are a little better than we thought. And when you look at Arizona State, this is a team that, in my opinion, was pretty bad last year, Bill. You talk about a team that went 3-9, ended the season with a 36-point loss to Oregon, a 36-point loss to Arizona, a 52-point loss to Utah. They come out this season and they're 4-1. They just beat Kansas at home. They have a really good road win over a real scrappy Texas State team. They won at home against Mississippi State and Wyoming, and then their only loss is an 8-point loss at Texas Tech. This is a chance for them to say, hey, listen, we are bounced back. Big recruiting potential win for them. And then for Utah, it's a chance to say, hey, listen, we're fine. we're good. We had one bad game against Arizona, didn't play well, but we're going to bounce back and we're that team. And for Utah, it really comes down to, can their offense get it figured out or not? That's really what it boils down to. This is a big game for both teams, because if you're Utah, you could potentially get your second loss in conference play before we even get to the middle of October. And for Arizona State, it's their chance to say, hey, listen, we're a contender here, man. Yeah. And Utah was the sexy pick for a lot of people to win the league, and there's a chance they could get a second straight Big 12 loss against a former Pac-12 opponent. So their comrades are the ones that are putting them in positions, Bill, to be in some tough spots here in the league.
Yeah, Scatterbo, good running back. 5 yards per carry. I would make a case right now. I mean, we're talking about Virginia earlier. Arizona State might be the most improved team in the country. They averaged 17.8 points per game last year. They were bad last year. They had the Rashada situation on top of everything else. It was a disaster for Kenny Dillingham. And, he had a couple press conference moments that were weird. Utah probably got the more pressure for all those reasons you said. They were the preseason pick to win the conference. The weekly joke has been the Cam Rising status updates. Like, we think he's going to play, and then he doesn't play. This has been going on for 2 years with him now with separate injuries. And Zach Wilson throws picks. Or not Zach Wilson, Isaac Wilson. I'm sorry. Zach Wilson also throws picks. But, he's on an NFL bench now. But they can't turn the ball over. They've got to be able to run the ball effectively. They crushed Arizona State last year. It was like 55-3.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think this one will be a little closer. Those Friday night games, don't ask me to pick them. I've been off on those ever since I got Kansas State, Arizona, right? I've been off on Friday night ever since.
Bill, the interesting thing about this game, you talk about Arizona State. Do you know how many games Arizona State had? I'm going to pull a Bill Trocchi on you. I'm going to give you a little Trocchi trivia here in the Irish Breakdown show. Do you know how many times Arizona State scored over 30 points in a game last year?
Once, maybe?
Once. You nailed it. Once. They have literally scored over 30 or more points in 4 of their 5 games so far this season. 48 against Wyoming, 30 against Mississippi State, 31 against Texas State, and 35 against Kansas. And even in their loss, they scored 22, which for them last year was a pretty good offensive outing for how they played last season. So to your point, a much improved football team. Getting Sam Levitt in as a transfer, he's been solid this season. The running game has been good so far this season. But the other thing, too, is their defense has improved from last year as well. They were giving up over almost 32 points a game last season. And so far this season, they're only giving up 23. They're not great on defense, but they're at least able to make enough stops to where their offense can do enough to win. So I think this is a very interesting game. I don't know what to make of Utah, to be honest with you, Bill. I really don't, because they can't get their quarterback healthy, and their offense just doesn't do it for me.
Right.
I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. And honestly, I like Arizona State in this game, Bill. I really do. This is a confident football team.
Straight up. I can live with that, but I'm going to go Utah. I put them by a touchdown. I think let's see what I had. 31-24. So, that just says right there it's going to be close. Yeah. You can get caught up in the desert. Mm-hmm. It can be one of those tough games. Does it start at 10? Does that game start at 10? Please
it's the night game. It's the 10:30 or 11. It's the 10:30 game.
There's a high likelihood I fall asleep because we have a loaded Saturday.
If the score is going to be like yours, and I'm going 24-20 Arizona State, if the scores are what we think they're going to be, then you'll probably fall asleep.
I'll probably fall asleep. Last week though, I did gut out both of those games. UNLV, Syracuse was entertaining, and for the bettors out there, and I'm sure you got a couple on your thing there. Michigan State kicked a field goal with a minute left to cover the spread, 31-10. That's why you don't bet. Yeah, that's why I always tell my son that's why you don't do it.
Absolutely right. Well, Bill, 8:00 on Saturday night. Now there's another big game in the Big 12. It's going to be on Fox. That is number 11 Iowa State, who's undefeated at 5-0, playing at West Virginia. Now, Iowa State's been a pleasant surprise this season so far. They are 5-0. Now, I would contend that they haven't really beat anybody yet. Their win over Iowa was good. I thought that was more about Iowa kind of choking that game away. Their second best win, Bill, and I don't know that this is debatable, is over North Dakota. So, their other wins are over a Baylor team that's not very good, a Houston team who's awful, in Arkansas State. West Virginia, on the other hand, is a little bit more battle-tested. Started the season off against Penn State, got beat convincingly in that game. Had a close loss late against Pitt, and Pitt is another sneaky good team. I actually think Pitt's the most improved team in college football. They were 3-9 last year. They're 5-0 so far this season.
Very good.
And so they're a bit of a bounce back story as well. And there's a lot of those, Bill. And then coming off a very convincing win last weekend where they dominated Oklahoma State in Stillwater. So this is sort of is West Virginia legit? Is Iowa legit? This is a big game. And if Iowa wins this game, Iowa State wins this game, Bill, they improve to 3-0 in the league, which is going to be big. And if they don't, West Virginia improves to 3-0 in the league. So this is a big one. It's not getting a ton of attention because the Big 12 is just not getting the attention because it's honest. There's a reason for it because there's some huge games in the other leagues. But this is why I say this is going to be a big weekend in the Big 12. And this is one of those games where West Virginia's got a chance. Hey, we're legit, or Iowa State's going to prove that they're legit.
Yeah, it's third wheel conference, unfortunately, because it's super entertaining. It's hard to compete with. The TV ratings show that with the SEC and the Big Ten and Notre Dame. Those are what people watch, but it doesn't mean that it's not entertaining. I got West Virginia in an upset for starters. I'll lead with that. This was my upset pick of the week, and I don't take too many of those. Iowa State's won 4 of the last 5 meetings, but candidate for – and I say it every week on here, I think this is the drunk game, the one that could get weird, have a bunch of fumbles or a pick six, a scoop six, something like that changes the game. West Virginia has played better. And the number you need to watch in this game is Garrett Green. If he can complete about 60% of his passes and be a threat in the running game and stress out what has been a good Iowa State defense, but your point, what elite offense have they played?
Right.
They beat up on Houston and Iowa, and I watched Iowa's offense last week. It's not very good. Maybe West Virginia stresses them out a little bit. Maybe that Morgantown crowd that's had all day to drink beer is riled up.
That's where it's at for me. Right. That is not a fun place to play at night when they're good.
When's the last time Notre Dame was there at night? That's got to be ages ago, right?
Oh, man. Yeah. I can look it up here real quick. I'm on this.
I'm curious because I remember, we always drop a Major Harris reference whenever we can.
Since the night,
right.
They've only played one game in Morgantown, and that was not at night. That was an afternoon game. That was back in 2000. So it was in the Bob Davie era.
Wow.
The first time these two teams ever played was the Fiesta Bowl after the 1988 season. And then they played again in 1997 in South Bend. They played in 2000 in Morgantown, and then they played in 2001 in South Bend. Notre Dame is 4-0 against West Virginia.
Well, there you go. No wonder they didn't schedule you.
Yes.
They didn't bring those Catholics to Morgantown. Yeah. Of course not.
But this is I remember LSU having a tough time playing at Morgantown a number of years ago. This is not a great place to play when they're a decent team, and I think they're a solid team this season. So I actually like West Virginia in this game. I think this is I do think Iowa State's defense is very good, Bill. I don't think it's like, oh, they're not really good. They're just smoke and mirrors. I think this is a very good defense. I just don't know that it's got enough horses on offense to score enough to beat West Virginia. I could see this being a 27-17, 27-20 type of game. That actually is where I'm going. I do like the Beck kid at quarterback for Iowa State. I just think West Virginia is just all around the better team.
He doesn't commit a lot of mistakes. And they're the boring is beautiful formula of having 3 running backs that average 5 yards a carry, but none of them are superstars. Matt Campbell's perfected this. And I don't know, man. I'll push back on you a little bit on something. I did have them ranked ahead of BYU, but I have them back-to-back.
Based on what?
I know that BYU beat Kansas State. I understand that. But
SMU.
Correct. So resume probably them, but they haven't given up any points. I like Beck. I think if BYU played Iowa State, the home team wins. That's what I would do with that.
So you base rankings off of what might happen if teams play, not what they've done?
No, they have the best defense in the Big 12 right now. And I go off that a lot. And yes, we talked about the teams that they've played, but with BYU, watched them against Baylor. They are a little Dr. Jekyll. I almost called him Dr. Heckle Hyde. Let me get that reference right. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr.
Jekyll. I struggled right through that 4 times.
See, this is why you should be ranking BYU.
Dr. Heckle. Dr. Heckle. But they were, I don't even know if kids know that reference anymore. Baylor came back on them in the second half by a lot. And so maybe I'm not all the way there on BYU, understanding what they did to Kansas State and beating a solid SMU team.
Right, and that's coming off of a potential letdown game where they beat a ranked team by 29, where they beat SMU on the road by 3. SMU has not lost since then. They've rolled teams basically since then. So basically you had a bad second half against Baylor in a game you won on the road is the reason you have them behind a team who has not beat anybody with a pulse. Well, I shouldn't say that. Iowa's got a pulse, and that was on the road, but Iowa's not that good of a football. I mean,
I mean, we'll see. BYU probably, you got me there. You probably caught me a little bit, but I mean, I'm cool with Iowa State there. If Iowa State wins this game, it's
But here's the point, Bill. This is what I like about the Big 12. It's going to work itself out of these next couple weeks. If Iowa State goes on the road and beats West Virginia on Saturday, and then BYU, it can't build on their success and loses to Arizona, then all of a sudden, hey, we're having this conversation, right? And that's what I love about it. Is we're going to find out on the field. And this is going to be a good test for us to find out if Iowa State is as good as their ranking shows. Because if you're a legitimate number 11 team in the country, West Virginia is a good team, and I'm not expecting you to smash them, but you should win against an unranked team on the road, right? I mean, that's pretty much where you should be.
I put West Virginia 24-21, and if I'm wrong, then
I'm 24-20. I have West Virginia winning 24-20.
So if I'm wrong, you can send me to Dr. Hechtel.
Well, we won't. If you're wrong, I'm wrong, so I won't be calling you out on that one. Last game in the Big 12, Bill, is another very intriguing game. It's 10:15 on Saturday night, so I will be home in time to watch this one. Number 18, Kansas State against Colorado, a 4-1 team that people just kind of wrote off after their early season loss to Nebraska, where they looked really bad. And I saw a lot of people predicting them the next week to lose to Colorado State, and they smacked Colorado State. Had a great comeback win over Baylor, but last week is when they showed me a little something. They went on the road against UCF and destroyed them last weekend. Is that, we use this expression, fool's gold a little bit, Bill. They had a bye week. Now they're coming out fresh. This is a huge opportunity for Colorado. This could be, in my opinion, the biggest win of the Deion Sanders era. And I don't think it's close. I mean, TCU was a good win last year, but they weren't a very good team. This is going to be your first potential win over a ranked opponent. I don't believe that was TCU might have been ranked when they beat them last year, but they ended up not being a very good team. This is a good Kansas State team. If you're going to be a legit Big 12 title contender, Deion Sanders, if you want your son and your star cornerback to be considered best of the best players, these are spotlight games where they can show their stuff and shine. And then if you're K-State, hey, we had the BYU game was weird because they were winning 6-0. They were really controlling the game against BYU. And then just like that, it got nuts and 17 points in 2 minutes by BYU. And then they rolled them in the second half. This is a big opportunity for both teams, but this is a game where Colorado has a chance to say, hey, listen, all y'all said we're overrated. We're not this, we're not that. Well, now look at us. We're a pretty good football. We lost to a pretty good Nebraska team on the road. We're a pretty good football team. Or you say, yeah, you beat up on teams that aren't that good, but when you play a team that can play defense, they shut you down. It's going to be a statement game for Colorado one way or the other. They're either going to make a real positive statement and maybe crack the top 25 next week, or they're going to say, yeah, they're not that good. They're better than they were, but they're not as good as people thought.
This is the closest they've had the microphone since the Oregon game. Mm-hmm. Where they have the microphone late at night. We're watching all these awesome games all night. High State, Oregon will be over or ending. You'll slide right into this game. They have the mic. If they go out, beat Kansas State in the same way that they beat UCF, which was a huge surprise to me, honestly, given how UCF runs the football. And I'm kind of thinking the same thing here. I'm in theory, Kansas State should be able to run all over them. with Johnson and Giddens, who you called that a couple weeks ago. Giddens is a load, dude. He's really good. And then Dylan Edwards, the Colorado transfer on top of it, versus Colorado is the 2 best football players in the conference. Is that enough? Shedeur Sanders is the best quarterback in the conference. I could say that he's the only one being considered a top pick.
That is not a debate. The only thing I say, maybe there's a couple other players that are better than him, but they have let's say this. They absolutely have the best quarterback in the league, and they have the best player in the league.
They have the best football player,
right,
arguably, in the country.
Yeah.
And that's being played out with he's on pace for 1,800 snaps, something like that, which is, it's 1,500. He's on pace for 1,500 snaps, which would be a third more than last year. And then we can debate that all you want, but those two have the mic, and Dion does too, because if they win that game, you're beating one of the popular preseason favorites. You're doing it at home. You're getting the slide into SportsCenter. I don't know if Van Pelt does that anymore. I think the last couple of weeks I've noticed it's others, but you get the lead on SportsCenter at 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. So, and probably the next morning. So this is a huge opportunity for Colorado. I think I've gone back and forth on it this week, Brian. I can't decide if it's going to be a close game or not.
Meaning Colorado wins convincingly or K-State wins convincingly?
K-State. But they gave me pause because they had that meltdown at BYU a couple weeks ago.
Bill, the thing that makes this game tough is the UCF game. It's a great win. But here's the problem with evaluating that. That's just Gus Malzahn. He just has those games where his team just shows up and they're awful and they get rolled in a game where you're like, how did that happen? I didn't see that one coming, and that's just kind of what Gus Malzahn has kind of always been, where they'll just have that game where they just come out and you're like, I have no clue how they got beat that bad by that team. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't see that coming. And then they'll have games where they come out and destroy someone you don't expect, like Oklahoma State last year. They beat a top 20 Oklahoma State team by 42, something like that. And so was it just one of those UCF didn't show up moments? But at the same time, I say, man, but they still scored 41 offensive points. They had that late pick 6 they put on the board late, but so I kind of don't look at that. But still, 41 points is really impressive. This is a whole different defense, though, in my opinion, than what they're facing, what they played last week.
Good front seven.
Yeah, UCF's defense is not very good. This is a pretty darn good defense. So can they have it? I'm going to be honest. I actually like Colorado in this game.
Okay,
I do. I don't feel great about it because I think K-State's the better coach team. I think K-State's certainly has the better defense, but it's on the road. It's in Colorado. I think that fan base is going to be loud and fired up. And look, this is a good team coming off of a big win. I think any maybe potential lost momentum they had with their own fan base, they got back after last weekend. Bill. I mean, they have the crazy comeback win against Baylor, and then they built on that. I actually kind of like Colorado in this game. I'm going to end up looking stupid for it, I think, but I actually like. I think it's about matchups. I don't know that K-State's secondary is good enough to make enough stops to allow their offense to thrive. Now, but can Avery Johnson make enough plays? Like, here's my concern if I'm K-State. If K-State wins, it's going to look a lot like the Nebraska game, in my opinion, where you pretty much dominate the line of scrimmage and you pressure Shedeur and they can't move the ball, and you win, 27-13. If this becomes a game where Colorado's offense is moving and scoring, I don't know that K-State can win a game like that, where they've got to answer touchdown for touchdown against a team that's got this kind of firepower on offense. That's my concern, and that's the unknown of this matchup. But I'm going to lean towards Colorado does enough to win. I'm going to go 31-28.
I got it 31-27 the other way, Kansas State.
So we're close.
I mean,
close.
I always look at turnover margin. That's one of my favorites. Who's +7 the last 3 games for Colorado. Shedeur doesn't turn the ball over. Yep. He hasn't turned the ball over his entire career, and that will make it. I will say this, and I know we're going to talk about these other 4 games, but that's as interesting as any of the next 4 we're going to talk about. And I know Colorado's not ranked. They win that one, they will be.
Yeah, they should be. I mean, at that point in time, your only win is over what, a 4-5-1 Nebraska team, right? So, yeah, I mean, they should be ranked at that point in time. So, Bill, that's the Big 12 look. Let's dive into the big games, man, because this is really where it's at. And just some absolutely monster games this weekend. Let's kind of just go in a little bit chronological order, Bill, of when the games are played, and we'll start with a game out in the West Coast. A game between two Big Ten teams that's being played in Pacific Coast time zone because of Penn State going out to USC. I mean, this is a game where Penn State says, hey, we're legit. We're a legit team. This is a different looking Penn State team. They're good in the trenches this year. Their skill on offense is not great on the outside. Really good tight end, really good running backs. Drew Aller solid. Defense is very good in the front seven. Not quite as good in the secondary against a USC team that's reeling a little bit, to be honest with you, Bill. Does going home fix it for USC? Does that allow them to kind of have some success, or does Penn State keep rolling and USC realizes maybe we had it pretty good in the Pac-12 where we were pretty much more talented than everybody outside of two teams in our league?
Yeah, we wrote about this week, and Notre Dame is not this. They've done the Stanford USC thing for years, so they're not. Big Ten teams are bad when they go to the West Coast, and you're seeing that in that trend that got tossed around over the weekend. You know, Washington, UCLA, Oregon, USC at home, only one loss in Big Ten play to Indiana from one of the new ones, the newbies. UCLA and Oregon play that didn't count. Traveling across country, 0-4. Big Ten teams before this season playing regular season games in the Pac-12 against those teams, and I know this because I've watched it for years and texted buddies about it, and knowing it's coming. 10-31. Penn State hasn't played a game on the West Coast in the regular season against one of these teams since they played USC in 90 and 91.
Yeah.
So, and you heard Franklin talking about the airport. These are very real things that impact you on the field. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm telling you, I think USC has a chance if they stop an inside zone. Yeah. They are brutal against the run against this Big Ten style rushing attack, which was talked about all offseason. 5.3 yards per carry allowing. Getting beat by Minnesota is inexcusable. I don't care where you have to travel.
Yes, this is a team that lost at home to North Carolina.
Yeah, they're
not good.
USC's not, and Lincoln Riley, I've seen him pop up on my feed a little bit this week saying, we're a couple plays from being undefeated. Fan bases hate hearing that. I think they despise. Imagine Marcus Freeman saying, we're a couple plays from – we're two plays from beating Northern Illinois.
Bill, Notre Dame fans are very familiar with that because Brian Kelly used to do that crap all the time. So I meant in 2015, we're a couple plays away from being undefeated. And it's like, but you're not.
But you're not undefeated.
Exactly.
So
you didn't make those plays, right.
So the travel versus the runs, it's going to be a fun game.
Here's where I'm torn, Bill, because USC looked really good against LSU. And what does LSU not have? A really good defense. They don't. And USC was able to roll. When they have played teams that punch them in the mouth a little bit in the trenches, they haven't been able to pull it out. Now, again, both games came down to the wire. It's not like they got blown out like last year. They both came down to the wire. But it's just they have not shown the ability to really play physical in the trench football against anybody that's decent. I mean, they lost to two teams that have very mediocre offenses, Bill. If we're being honest, Michigan's offense is not very good this season. It's just not. And Minnesota's offense is worse. I mean, this is an offense that if you take away their 48 points against an FCS team, has scored 17 points, 14 points, 24 points, and 24 points against Power 4 teams, and only scored 27 points against Nevada. And, they were able to go down the field and kind of beat you last week. And then, we know about Michigan's issues. Michigan's only scored over 30 points once in the season, and that was because they had a pick six in that game, and both of these teams beat USC because they just went right at USC physically and kept their offense off the field, kept their offense from getting any rhythm. Neither of those teams are anywhere close to as good as what Penn State is. And so it comes down to if you take away the context of where the game is being played, this should be a Penn State win and a Penn State win by 10 points. But You can't remove that context when you're looking at the game because, as you said, these teams are not used to this. I'm going to tell you something right now. Big Ten teams are going to need – Big Ten fans are going to stop running their mouths about how Notre Dame doesn't play a tough schedule as they start understanding how tough it is to fly 1 week to Boston and the next week out to L.A. to play football games. That's not easy. And they're learning that, to your point.
That's why Michigan wasn't a surprise last week. And, you dig into that. We did a story over at Sporting News about those trends. The Pac-12 schools were actually better coming to the Big Ten school. There were something like 19 and 27. So, Michigan going out to Washington and losing to – I know I picked Michigan in that game, but that didn't surprise me one bit. So, when we talk about the other Big Ten game, we'll get into what I think that travel means for Ohio State. But I like Penn State to win the game. I think it's going to be close, though. I think I had it at like 27-23. I do think USC hangs around. Their passing attack could get after it a little bit. And if Drew Aller makes a couple mistakes, which he hasn't to this point, the Trojans could hang in this game. It's going to feel like an old school Rose Bowl. It'll be fun to watch. All-time uniform game. Good stuff.
For a Notre Dame fan, I want USC to win this game. It's big for them to win this game. I don't know that USC can get back in the top 25 if they can't win this game. It'll be their third loss in a row. And when you look at what they have left on the schedule, they've lost 2 out of 3. And then the one that they won, they were down 21-10 at halftime of that game. So I'm incorrect. They've lost 2 out of 3. They play at Maryland. It's an East cross-country trip. At Washington, they have to play Nebraska at home, Rutgers at home. Those aren't gimme wins right now. This is a big game for USC. This could make or break Lincoln Riley's tenure at Oklahoma or at USC. It really could. If you fall to 1-3 with what they have coming down the pike, this could be a second 5+ loss season for Lincoln Riley. It really could. So this is a big one.
Question.
Yeah. This is a big one. I mean, when you look at if they lose this game, they fall to 3-3. They still got to go. They got to go to Maryland next week. You've got to go to Washington. You've got Nebraska coming to your place, Rutgers coming to your place, and then you got Notre Dame coming to your place. I don't see how they don't lose 2 more games if they lose this one. So, and I'm unfortunately for Notre Dame, but also fortunately as a Notre Dame fan because you don't root for USC, but I don't often find myself rooting for Penn State. I do like Penn State in this game. USC is going to have to prove to me they can beat a physical football team before I can predict them to win a physical football team against a physical football team. I'm actually going 30-24. I do think it'll be a good game, just like their other 2 losses were both close games. It's just I don't think they're good enough up front, and I don't think their quarterback's good enough to put this team on his shoulders and lead them to a victory against a team like Penn State. So I'm going Nittany Lions 30-24.
I got 28-24, just under that spread. I mean, I think the spread's at 5.5, so you can sneak a cover either way. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fun. I want to see Penn State a win here. They really established themselves. I mean, they're ranked number 4. They'll be ranked number 3 or higher, and I can't remember the last time they were that high.
So, Bill, let's talk about because they're gonna if they win this game, they would slide up to number 3, right? Because most likely, because 2 and 3 play each other. Let's talk about the other 3:30 game, Bill. This is Texas against Oklahoma. Number 1 Texas against number 18 Oklahoma. It's going to be at 3:30 on ABC. Texas is a 14.5-point favorite. 50.5 is the over-under, Bill. I don't know that I necessarily care to spend a lot of time on this game.
We don't have to.
It really comes down to, does the quarterback change again create any stagnation, or is Texas get caught peaking to next week against Georgia? If Texas plays their game, Oklahoma's just not very good. They're not. Texas should roll in this game. My thought is, Bill, the rivalry aspect plus a little payback for last year is why I think Texas dominates this game. I think the only hope that Oklahoma has is they can force a lot of turnovers and they catch a Texas team that's not as focused on them as they should be because they've got the Bulldogs coming up next week.
That's the other – that's why I gave into this one as well, that the rivalry factor takes on a meaning. Oklahoma plays pretty good defense, but how long can you do it? It's a huge spread for a game that is just traditional one-score game. After 9 of the last 10 have been one-score games, the outlier a 49-0 blowout 2 years ago. Oklahoma had 2 weeks to prepare around Michael Hawkins Jr. I don't think he's there yet as a passer. Obviously, news broke today that Texas is going to start Quinn Ewers. Also not surprised. I don't think Arch Manning's going to play unless it's a blowout. For those that are tuning in to see Arch, you're going to see a lot of, if he wears a hat on the sideline, I don't even know. But that's what you're going to see. And Ewers is back. I don't think they'll have any stagnation. They put the ball on the turf a little bit with the run game. So I think you're going to watch an instant repeat of Michigan, honestly.
Okay.
Where it's close early. Maybe the Sooners get a turnover. Maybe they don't. But the difference is Texas kind of called off the dogs on Michigan a little bit. They won't call off the dogs here if they don't have to. So that's where the other end of the rivalry spectrum kicks in.
Yeah. I do think Oklahoma might be a little better at the skill positions on defense outside of the one Will Johnson position, perhaps slightly better. So maybe that allows them to keep it down. But I think they're going to have the same issues that Michigan had. They're not going to be able to move the ball. This is a solid Texas defense. Like, they're not like Tennessee's defense or Ole Miss's defense, in my opinion. But this is a quality Texas defense, and they've got a good defensive coordinator. So I actually think Texas rolls, Bill. I've got this game being, you mentioned the Michigan game, similar type of score. I have it 30-14 is how I see this game. I think Oklahoma's going to maybe be able to make a couple stops early, but overall, their defense is going to get put in too many bad positions to keep them down for 4 quarters because their offense it's not. I mean, even last week against Auburn, they won 27-21. They had a pick 6 in that game, Bill. They had they had another scoring drive where they got a field goal that was a 3-yard drive. You know what I mean? So they're just not good offensively.
I think I got 31-21.
Okay. So
and that's for this game, that's a big spread because
do you see that? Can I ask this? Do you see that being like it's a legit 10-point game, or do you see it like Oklahoma puts one on the board late to make it
backdoor cover? Game? Backdoor cover. So it's like 31-14, and maybe they get a backdoor cover against the twos. Okay. I think Texas keeps them at arm's length. This is very similar to the score that it could have been Michigan, Texas. So I'm seeing the same game with the understanding that, Texas could blow the doors off this one. I saw a tweet last year, and I'm trying to think. I can't give the person credit, unfortunately. They likened this game to playing your best friend in a video game where you will pull out anything and everything just to beat your friend. You'll run plays you never run. You'll run a fake punt. It's that game. And this game is like that. It always, I got to cover it once. It was an unexpected result that day, way back in 2015. So I got 31-21. Texas moves on. Texas stays number 1, sets up that Georgia showdown.
Let's stay in the SEC, Bill, which is weird to say after talking about Oklahoma and Texas. But let's stay in the SEC for the next game. And that is going to be a 7:30 kickoff down in Baton Rouge. It is the number 9 Ole Miss Rebels against the number 13 LSU Tigers. Ole Miss, I thought, had a really nice bounce-back win last weekend. They showed us a little something. Their offense is not as good as maybe people thought it was going to be, but their defense is every bit as good as it looks statistically based on what it showed last weekend. But even the game they lost, they only gave up 20 points in that game. So, and then I think one of those came off of a wild big play in the pass game where guys should have got tackled. I thought that was a really good non-Lane Kiffin-esque bounce-back win where it was about toughness and really beating that team into the ground. You're playing an LSU team that got some much-needed rest after, a stretch where, USC got good win against USC. They struggled early against Nicholls State, put them away. Don't beat South Carolina if Lenore Sellers doesn't get hurt. Struggled to put UCLA away, and then had a really good blowout win over South Alabama and then a bye. This is going to be a game where I feel like I got a good sense of who Ole Miss is. I don't know who LSU is yet. And this game is obviously going to tell us a lot about who that team is since the USC game. Have they improved? Is their defense better? Can they protect the quarterback well enough against this Ole Miss defense to come out and earn what would be a really big win for Brian Kelly and LSU because again, they got a loss, Bill, but they haven't lost yet in the league. So this is a big game for both squads. Ole Miss has an SEC loss.
They do.
I mean, you lose this game, and now you're 2 games behind LSU, much less, some of those other teams in your league.
Right. And, Garrett Nussmeier is pretty good. That's what I do know about LSU.
He's got weapons.
He's throwing it around really well. Yeah, he's throwing touchdowns. Hasn't taken a ton of sacks. They got the tackles. This would have been an elimination game in the past. I think what I do know about both teams, they commit way too many penalties. Ole Miss in particular, even though they won last week, they still had a ton of penalties. And you get the penalties in a game like this at a place like that, it can balloon on you real quick. I mean, LSU's lost exactly 1 home game under Brian Kelly, and it was to a team that has a similar makeup to this Ole Miss team. It was Hendon Hooker in Tennessee, and went up and down on them. And that was a day game. It wasn't a night game. It's very similar to what we were saying about Morgantown, where, yeah, it's going to be a tough environment for Ole Miss. But Brian, I do this all the time. I'm guilty of this. Why are they favored then? Why are they favored if they're going to LSU?
Oh, yeah.
It's so tough to play there. It's because they're the better team with the better quarterback. And if Trey Harris is okay, they should be able to score some points on LSU.
The concern I would have, Ole Miss is a 3.5-point favorite, to your point. The over-under 61.5. My thing is, though, if they get close to the over-under, I think LSU wins. Because if Ole Miss can't stop LSU, I have more faith right now in the LSU offense to make some of those plays in the fourth quarter because of the offensive line and the quarterback than I do, with all due respect to Jackson Dart. Ole Miss has a great receiving core, but so does LSU. And so it comes down to the offensive line and the quarterback. And that's kind of how last year's game was, Bill. I mean, it was Brian Kelly thought, who has the ball last. And in last year's instance, I think Ole Miss was able to make the stop late in the game, which is a tough situation, but Ole Miss had the last real drive, and they went down and won the game. I think if this game's a shootout, I think LSU wins this game. If Ole Miss is going to win, it's because they do what USC did, which is basically whip LSU in the trenches and don't let Garrett Nussmeier get comfortable in throwing the football. That's really what it comes down to for me in this game, because Ole Miss has not handled these type of moments well. You think back to last year at Georgia. Night game, big game, they're kind of rolling, and they just go on the road at night and just get smacked, and then you say, well, they had a really good game against LSU last year, really good win. Yeah, but that was at home, and it was an afternoon game, so they have not played great at night the last couple years, Bill, when they've played in these type of big moments.
Yeah. And it's a big opportunity for both teams, obviously. Stick a leg in the I think LSU could obviously make a statement. All that said, I got Ole Miss winning the game.
Okay. What do you see? What do you see score wise?
It's 35-31 a shootout.
Okay.
Compared to the last 2
years,
so. It's not.
I think so.
They played a 60 last year.
That's not a shootout. That's just you guys have 2 terrible defenses.
30
and insanely good skill talent at LSU last year.
Well, if they give up 31 points, they could play with fire there. So, but I like their team a little more. I think they learned from the Kentucky loss and their backs against the wall. There was a couple weeks ago, we're saying they had a case to be number 1. But LSU, I mean, if you're picking LSU, I'm not going to argue the track record, playing there at night, all those things. We'll find out if Ole Miss can do it. If Ole Miss loses, we will divert directly to the Lane Kiffin to Florida talk. Yeah. That'll kick up about Sunday at 11 a.m., especially if Florida loses to Tennessee by 20 points.
Bill, I've been so back and forth on this game, and what it really comes down to is Lane Kiffin showed me a little something last week with a nice bounce-back win. But South Carolina, they're not that good of a team, is my first thought. But then I think, well, hold on a second. Didn't you just say that South Carolina should have beat LSU? Yeah, I did. That's where I'm back and forth on this, because I still don't know how good LSU is, to be honest with you. I mean, they really haven't played anybody that they should have been competitive with, where, Ole Miss has played back-to-back games against quality SEC opponents. And, I really am back and forth. But what it comes down to it is I think Ole Miss is the better team, but they have not played well in these environments in night games on the road. And I'm looking through it. Last game at Baton Rouge, they lost 45-20. They lost 53-48, 45-16, 38-21, lost 10-7, 41-35, 43-16. The last time they won a game in Baton Rouge was back in 2008. And these are teams that play every year. So you're playing at home
Right.
or on the road every other year.
Every other year, yeah.
So this is my last show me game for Lane Kiffin. If you win this one on the road, I'm bought in. I'm bought in for Ole Miss. I'm not there yet. I'm going 30-27 LSU is where I'm going with this one.
That's not a bad. It's a similar score. We've had a lot of 4 and 5 point games.
Yeah.
If we have the case, it's going to be entertaining.
Yeah, I think it will be a good game. I think if Ole Miss wins, I think it'll be more low scoring than that. I think if Ole Miss wins, it'll be like 24-13, where their defense just stifles Garrett Nussmeier. Because I still don't think LSU can run the ball that well. And if they can, and the Ole Miss pass rush is pretty good. If Ole Miss's pass, like honestly, Bill, that's what's going to determine this game for Ole Miss. It's that right there. If their D-line, Walter Nolan and that group does what they're capable of, like they did to South Carolina last week, this is a much better O-line than South Carolina has, though. That's what I think wins them the game. And so I think if they're going to win, it's going to be a 24-13, 27-16 type of game where Garrett Nussmeier has no time to throw.
For sure.
Let's get into the last game, Bill. This is not only the biggest game of the weekend, but this will be one of the 3 or 4 biggest regular season games of the season, meaning there's going to be more on the line, more at stake, top 5 teams that people believe to be title contenders, certainly the 2 best teams in the Big Ten so far, 2 of the 3 best teams in the Big Ten so far. I do think Penn State has a case to make to be maybe right there with Oregon, if not better. Neither team, they both had some ugly wins. Ohio State's clearly the best team in the country, or excuse me, the best team in the Big Ten, arguably the best team in the country right now, the way that they're playing. Rough first half against Iowa last week offensively. Second half just rolled them in the second half. Huge game. I mean, you're going out to the West Coast. This is going to be, I believe, a 7:30 kickoff, which is what's going to be interesting, Bill, is it is it is 7:30, correct? That is the kickoff time for this game, which means it will have at least half the game will not be a night game, correct? It will be sort of an afternoon game kickoff time for them. Ohio State's a 3-point favorite on the road. 54.5 is the over-under. I actually think they're going to. That's the one I would feel most comfortable if they're going to go over that. Huge game. This is the first real test for both teams, in my opinion. Like Iowa's a nice quality warm-up game. Boise State's a pretty decent football team. This is really the first true test for both teams, and we're going to find out really just how good these teams are, in my opinion, Bill.
Yeah, I miscalculated it last time they played. I was at that game at the shoe. I thought Ohio State would dominate up front. They didn't. Thought Ohio State would out-scheme Oregon on the perimeter. They didn't. Anthony Brown went into the shoe and won. So if you're dismissing Oregon in that vein, that's foolish. I do think Ohio State, I don't know if they're the best team. I think they are the most complete team in the country from the standpoint of Will Howard just is out there, doesn't have to mess it up. Anytime you got 2 running backs behind you that combined average around 8 yards per carry, it's 7.9 something. Henderson and Judkins are amazing. You've got this freak show freshman catching the ball opposite Emeka, who had 3 touchdowns last week. Their offensive line is the question. It's a long-winded way of getting to that because Oregon's front can get after it. I don't know Jordan Birch and Mateo Uiagalelei. I'm just going to have to say that last name for the rest of my life. Uiagalelei, sorry. They're going to have to get after it a little bit. And Oregon's going to have to feed off the home field. I'm interested to see what the stadium looks like. How much scarlet and gray's out there, because they travel well. You know that.
Normally, yeah, they really do.
They'll put really some patches in that stadium. And, for Oregon, does the fit 2 things. Does the running game around Jordan James work? And does Dylan Gabriel avoid mistakes against the best defense he's seen all year? He struggled with Michigan State a little bit last week. That worries me.
He has not been great. I mean, I know the numbers look good, but I look at the numbers, Bill, and I don't see a level of play that supports the numbers. Like when you're completing almost 78% of your passes, I expect your yards per attempt to be north of 8.7, like well north of 9, much less at 8.7. A lot of quick game. You mentioned some of the mistakes that he's made. He's thrown 3 picks in his last 2 games. I I just have not. I've said it before, Bill. I just have not been impressed with this Oregon offense so far this season. I just haven't.
And you're right, because people will say, well, how can you not be? Look at the stats. Well, no, like I was kind of felt the same way last week. A little stop and start.
Right.
Tej Johnson should be getting more than he is. Evan Stewart should be getting more. You're right. So I would go right into the, right into it. We'll see what happens.
Well, it's like even the game against Oregon State. I know they blew Oregon State out and all, but they scored 27 points in the second half. I mean, it was a 22-14 game at halftime. I don't know. And you're doing that against defenses that aren't in the same universe as the one that you're going to play on Saturday. So, and maybe this is a thing, Bill, where Oregon has just been kind of looking past all these teams, knowing that this game is coming down the pike. I mean, maybe that's it. But, and then with Ohio State, this is by far the most athletic team that Ohio State will have faced.
Mm-hmm.
Playing Iowa one week and then Oregon the next can jack you up a little bit as a defense, Bill. It can. It's everything. The formations are different. The looks are different. The run action is different. The tempo is different. The speed is different. Is there an adjustment period for the Buckeyes?
That's a great point. I asked Jack Sawyer the exact same question after the Ohio State-Iowa game last week. I said, I'm not insulting Iowa, but it's kind of like different speeds, right? And not how the players are, but the way they play. And he said, oh, yeah, absolutely. You're going to have to make that adjustment. Oregon will play faster. But he said the physicality is about the same.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Which makes it tough.
Which you're playing faster at the same physical speed and not where Iowa's just trying to play keep away. I made the analogy to Iowa last week. I said, as far if they're driving on the college football freeway, they're driving 10 to 15 miles under the speed limit. Oregon, they're speeding. They're going 10 miles over. So that's going to be the exchange rate there. Will be interesting to see. I mentioned West Coast travel earlier with Ohio State. They've actually traveled to the West Coast against these Pac-12 schools 5 times since 2000. They're 3-2. The biggest, most flagrant loss was when they played USC years ago with Terrell Pryor, quarterback, got smoked by a really good USC team out there. And so to your point, if you're sitting there as a Notre Dame fan and Ohio State goes out there and loses to Oregon and they start complaining about the travel, you can sit there and say, well, bro, we do this every year.
Every year.
Yep.
We do
this every year. So what are you talking about? And then you go wherever you're going to play Navy or Army on any given East Coast city the next week. So, I think Ohio State will travel well, and I think they win the game. I've seen them rise up in these moments. Actually, I'll ask you this question because I've gotten it a lot this week. Who's more pressure on, Dan Lanning or Ryan Day?
Oh, Ryan Day.
So I went the other way.
Yeah, Ryan Day. I mean, Dan Lanning's still in a little bit of a period of a bit of a grace period, I would say. I mean, he's in his third year. He's done really well so far. I don't think losing this game to a team that a lot of people think is arguably the best team in the country necessarily is like, oh man, he's not going to win. I mean, he's 27-5. I think Ryan Day's in a situation where there are some Ohio State fans that view him on the hot seat despite having an insanely good record because they had a quote unquote down year at 11-2 last year, 11-3 last year. You know what I mean? Like
I went the other way because he, Day's 10-7 against top 10 teams. And everything you say is correct, by the way. But I'm like looking at Lanning, you're 2-3. It could turn into that with the how. If they go for it on like a 4th down and miss, everybody's like, well, I compare Dan Lanning to Dan Campbell quite a bit. And it's the 4th down thing. It's the almost being immune from it because the 4th down things become a generational football argument of younger guys that are in their 20s are like, I would go for it there too. And you're basing your decision on outcome. Yes, I am basing it on outcome because they lost the game because they went for it there. Absolutely. Go watch Andy Reid coach, then get back to me.
This was my beef with USC and Minnesota last week. I said, it worked out, but I did not like the decision, to be honest with you. I mean, but you get into that, it's just a different mindset, how you look at it. But
what if is it fireable if they don't get that touchdown? That's what I told Bill. Yeah. Churchy said, it's fireable if they don't score there.
Yeah, I agree.
The sport is based on outcomes.
Right. So it's like the comeback was, but if you don't do that, USC goes down and they're in field goal range to tie the game. And I said, but what if you get stopped there on fourth down. Then they just got to get in the field goal game range to win. So sometimes like the decision is not good or bad, in my opinion, based on did it work or not, because sometimes it works out okay. You know what I mean? Like when Brian Kelly went for 2 against Northwestern back in 2014 when they were up 11 and didn't get it, if it would have worked, it still would have been a dumb decision.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it still would have been the wrong decision. And of course it didn't work. And then Northwestern got a touchdown, a 2-point conversion, and a field goal to tie it, send it overtime, and you lost the freaking game. Right. So I get where you're coming from. My only comment would be it's still a little too early in Dan Lanning's tenure to say he's going to now all of a sudden be on the hot seat if he doesn't win, where I think Ryan Day, at least from a perception standpoint, is on a little bit of a warmed up seat if he loses, because right now you're feeling good about Ohio State, right? Like they're smacking teams, they're doing this, they're doing what Ohio State always does. And then there's that one game against a team that runs the ball or does whatever that you then go out and get beat by. Now, I don't think there's any shame in going on the road and beating Oregon. And there's a good chance if they beat you today, y'all are going to have a rematch here in a couple months when you play in the Big Ten championship game, right? Is it still in Indianapolis this year?
It is.
Okay. So you're now going to get them on your turf late in the year in the cold, your turf meaning regionally, your turf. There's going to be a rematch if Ohio State loses. If Oregon loses, I don't think it's a guarantee that there's going to be a rematch in this game. There's going to be a rematch. It's either going to be Ohio State and Oregon or Ohio State and Penn State is the way I look at it right now, is the Big Ten rematch. But, I think Ryan Day could suffer a loss in this game, and you and I would look at it as football people and not Ohio State fans as like, look, dude, there's no shame in losing on the road in the close game to the number 3 freaking team in the country. That's not Ohio State fans are going to view it. And that's the thing.
That's why I said the how is so important with this game. Somebody has to lose, and one of these coaches has to lose. And I would say these two coaches we probably don't have enough time to that's an entire show. These guys are on the list of guys that we would expect to be the next coach to win a national championship.
Yeah.
That haven't won one. Fair.
Right.
So it's fun. It's huge. Do you want my final score yet? Is there anything else?
Like, how do you see the game playing out? Like, you give me the score and tell me where it comes from. Like, how you see it getting to that point in time.
Ohio State wins 30-22, 31-22, something like that. I think I had 31-22. And you've taught me to do this now. So, okay, I'll play it out for you. They jump out early, maybe quick 14. And we're like, oh, my God, it's the best team ever. Jeremiah Smith just made a touchdown catch. Holy cow. And then Oregon claws back in. Maybe makes it 31-14, and then they're trying to get back desperately, So they maybe, I guess 30-22 would do that then. So maybe they hold them to a couple field goals, and I did put 30-22. And the Ducks maybe not have a shot at the end of the game, but I just watch Ohio. I just look at Ohio State, the better football team. They're more complete, and with this West Coast travel stuff. I mean, they've traveled to Fiesta Bowls and done all that. And this team,
although that's a little different when you've got a month to prepare.
I understand.
Right? It's a little
different. I got you. Now, if Oregon beats them, as you guys know, I know some of your listeners know, I do live in Columbus. I will be on Columbus radio Monday morning. I know the first question, the first question would be about Ryan Day. To your point,
yeah. And it shouldn't be, but it will be.
It would be like what is wrong with Ryan Day and these?
Now, if they get smacked, Bill, then I think it's justifiable. Like if they just go out there and Oregon just physically whips their butts, then I can understand it.
Hate that Oregon's wearing black uniforms. By the way,
yeah.
Wish it was green. Wish they had those bright green Donald Duck uniforms or Puddles or whatever their mascot's called. 30-22. What you got?
So I actually have my final score, Bill, is I have it 27-17 Ohio State. And I actually see it the opposite of how you see the start. I actually think Oregon's going to come out and maybe put 10 points on the board in the first quarter and a half. And Ohio State's offense is going to scuttle a little bit early because I do, as a football coach, you see this all the time where a team plays a certain style of football, not them, but their opponents do. And you then go play a team that's polar opposites, and it takes you a little bit to adjust to the tempo and the speed. And I think that's going to happen on Saturday. And I don't think the Ohio State offense has been necessarily fast starters so far this season. I mean, even against some of the MAC teams, you look at the final score and you're like, wow, they scored 50 points. But but you kind of watched them early, and they were kind of sputtering a little bit. They were kind of out-athleting the other team, right? And so I actually think early on, Ohio State's going to need a little bit of time to get up to the speed. But what Ohio State can do now that they haven't been able to do in the last couple of years is they can go out there and punch you in the mouth and run it down your throat and slow the game down.
And they will.
In the past, where if they came out and the tempo was going fast, they're going fast on offense. And that's how you can kind of get out of funk, because it's like this game is going fast and we haven't had a chance to breathe yet. And we haven't had a chance to make changes. So I actually think that Oregon comes out, has like a 10-7, 14-10 lead at some point in time, whether it be halftime, late second quarter. But Ohio State starts to really pound on them, lean on them. And in the second half, it's very clear that Ohio State's the better team. And that's how I see this.
That's a good call. One of your 52-13 from one of your commenters. I don't know if it is that.
That would put Dan Lanning in a bad spot.
And that
because
right.
Here's the thing about Dan Lanning. I don't care as much about the top 25 record because I don't think he inherited a team that should dominate top 10 opponents, right? Here's the thing, though. They have not been good outside the Pac-12 when they play like teams that are Power 5 teams. They have not. Now, obviously, this year they've got some league wins, but if you go look at his tenure, Bill, not only have they struggled against some of the more highly ranked teams, but you go back to his first year, you get dominated by Georgia. You barely beat a North Carolina team missing several key weapons. You need to come back wing to beat them. Drake May makes a ton of plays on you. You come out last year and you struggle to beat Texas Tech, who was not that good. Then you lose the ranked opponents, and now you go and play Ohio State and you get smacked in the mouth. Like, but we beat Michigan State at home. Nobody cares. Right. When you play the big boys, you get dominated. And really they've only played two big boys out of their league in his 3 years, and it's Georgia, who beat you 49-3, and then Ohio State, who beat you 52-10. If you look at the score that Joe M put up, that is where I think Dan Lanning all of a sudden starts saying, "Hey, is this guy really that good? What did he inherit this? Yeah, he's a good recruiter, but he can't coach. That's going to be the talking point. Good recruiter, but gets out coached by Chip Kelly, gets out coached by now that Chip Kelly's got equal talent, which he didn't have at UCLA. Look what he does. Gets out coached by Kalen DeBoer, gets out coached by Kyle Whittingham, gets out coached by Kirby Smart. Now you get out coached by Ryan Day. Okay, now all of a sudden we're having a different conversation. Mm-hmm. And that's when you start to see some chinks in the armor. If this is a back and forth good football game that Ohio State wins, I don't think there's anything that negative to come out of this for just he's not there yet. But that's okay.
They win by like a 10, like your score. It's going to be like, we'll see it again November, or December, whatever.
Exactly.
But if it's 52-13 Ohio State, couple reactions that'd be one, and then depending on what Texas does, Ohio State may bump up to number one, and I wouldn't have a problem with it. They're pretty good, so it should be fun weekend. I do think I didn't see for sure Ohio State. I don't like the all white look. I like the white with the silver pants.
Yeah, I wish Ohio. I'm okay.
Silver pants,
like Notre Dame. I'm okay with a couple alternates throughout the year, but this alternate almost every week, I'm not a big fan of. You're Ohio State. You don't need to do all this.
Yeah, we need Oregon in the green, Ohio State wear your whites, and should be a fun game, fun weekend. Plenty of overreactions. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question, Bill. If you're looking at it from an Ohio State standpoint, what's the biggest fear that you would have about this game not going your way? What's the thing that you say, okay, I have Ohio State winning. We both have Ohio State clearly showing they're the better team, even though we're not talking blowout, but they're definitely a better team. You have an 8-point spread. I have a 10-point spread. You have Oregon clawing back late. I have Oregon leading a little bit. I mean, we see it similarly. What's the thing that could play out that causes this outcome to be outside of, okay, turnovers, but more so what's the root cause of the things that could happen? I know what my answer is. I'm very curious what your
Will Howard is bad.
Yeah, there you go. That's what my answer is going to be.
Like Will Howard goes out here and he's inaccurate first quarter. They not turnovers like you said. It's just like they come out.
Being bad leads to that though.
Let's play it out. Yeah, let's play it out. First two series, they throw it 3 times and he misses a couple third downs bad. And then it turns into, well, Kyle McCord's leading the AC. I know where it's going on my text with my buddies. It'll turn into Kyle McCord real quick. if I think we know what we have with Dylan Gabriel. He's been playing for 6 years.
Right.
And if Dylan Gabriel struggles in the red zone and they don't cash in, we're not going to act surprised. If Will Howard goes out there and struggles in the red zone and struggles on third down and isn't a factor in the running game, which he has been, and they keep talking about that would be the fear. Is Will Howard not the guy? Perfect. Like I said, been a great conductor so far. I want to hear why you think that is.
Why I think he's the issue?
Why you would say, is Will Howard bad in this game? How would that happen?
Well, number one is the offense gets no rhythm. And I said, look, I have Oregon actually getting a couple scores somewhat early because I think the tempo and they'll hit a couple big plays. And Oregon's going to have – Will Stein's going to have some stuff that's going to be like, okay, let's take advantage. I think they'll be able to generate a couple big plays. You do have a kid that's played in a lot of games like this in his tenure, not just at Oregon, but more so at Oklahoma and even at UCF to a degree, where he's not going to be overwhelmed by the moment thinking of Dylan Gabriel. And I see the crowd being crazy loud. The environment's loud. You've had this long West Coast trip. You're not used to it. Your quarterback comes out. He's not feeling comfortable in the pocket. Oregon's getting pressure on him. They're getting after it, and they're throwing a lot of different looks at him. He's missing balls. He's incomplete. You're getting off the field in a hurry. I mean, Oregon's 16th in the country in sacks, and they've only played 5 games. They're actually 11th in the country in sacks per game. Something like that where he's getting rattled. He starts missing open throws because the turnovers are one thing, but it's more so he's a 52% completion guy in this game, and he's getting sacked. Because he'll take some bad sacks in games. He'll throw some balls up. He had a couple against Iowa that should have got picked off, in my opinion, to be honest with you. On top of the pick he threw late in the second quarter, it's that, Bill. It's just that he gets harassed and he just doesn't know where to go with the football. And you'd see it a lot at K-State last year when he started getting pressure in his face. He starts throwing off his back foot. He starts just throwing it up. He starts just rushing throws, and he becomes very vulnerable, and he can be an offensive killer for your offense, like just a drive killer. And then it comes down to, can you now run on Oregon when that's all you can do in that particular game? Maybe, but that would be my concern is you make this where you now have to run the ball because you can't throw the ball, and your big play receivers can't make plays because your quarterback's throwing the ball up. That would be my concern because he just gets the pressure of the environment, and the Oregon defense just shakes them. That's my concern.
That's how that would happen. So at least we're on the same page there as usual.
Yeah, of course. I love it, man. Any other games this weekend that you got your eye on, Bill, before we get out of here that are some sneaky, interesting games? And we could have another whole hour on just some of those other games to look at. But there's any other game like that one game like, hey, we didn't talk about this. No one's talking about this, but I'm very curious to see how this game goes.
Pitt Cal. You mentioned Pitt earlier. Pitt would be 6-0 at that point. A very interesting ACC team. They've profiled Eli Holstein's playing very well for them. So that would be one that I'm, that's one that I zero in on right on a little bit. Other than that, not especially. I mean, I think we've got most of the games figured out that we're going to be flipping through. I mean, I'll peek in on Notre Dame, Stanford, obviously, and Alabama, South Carolina to see how the Crimson Tide bounce back from a horrible loss against Vandy. But other than that, pretty straightforward.
I have one from the league that you tend to live in the middle of, and this is an interesting one. Wisconsin at Rutgers. Mm-hmm. Rutgers has a chance to go to 5-1. I'm very curious to see what the conversation in Wisconsin is if the Badgers fall to 3-3 with a loss to Rutgers. I think people can understand losing to Bama. I think people understand, the USC game doesn't look as good now that USC's not that good, but, it's at USC. All of a sudden you go on the road and you get beat by Rutgers and you're 3-3, and you still have to play at Northwestern, at Iowa, at Nebraska, home against Penn State, home against Oregon. Is Wisconsin going to be a bowl team this year? And if they are they going to be a 6-6 bowl team? And is Luke Fickell really the answer at Wisconsin? Like, you fired Paul Chryst for that? That's going to be very interesting. And then at what point in time does he realize that the Longo experiment, the air raid in Wisconsin was a bad decision?
And then they got to get back to what they do.
Right.
Because you would be, in your scenario, they're getting beat by the school that does the stuff that they used to do. There you
Bingo.
go. Next week, though, in the Big Ten, Nebraska, Indiana. Thoroughly enthralled by Indiana with a hint of
Are they the only Big Ten team to go on the West Coast and get a win so far this year?
Like I said, 1-4. The Big Ten team, when they go over there, 1-4. The Pac-12, and we know what we're talking about. Pac-12 going back over 0-4. And that doesn't factor in Purdue going to the West Coast, going to Oregon State and losing.
That's right.
It's a very real thing, and I'm glad that you knew about that and caught on to that, because Notre Dame fans are like, when I say this to my best friend Andy, I mentioned him with teammates and stuff in high school, and he's a Notre Dame guy. When I start like saying, well, that Big Ten has to make that travel, he's like, why are you crying about it? Like,
right.
What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
have you ever paid attention to Notre Dame's schedule?
He's the golf buddy that you go on the golf cart and you're riding down the fairway and we're arguing before we get on number 2.
Sure.
Like that's him. So it's like, this is a really tough road game. And he's like, well, get on a plane and go. So very excited.
Well, it's like Notre Dame in 2017 in November, after already playing Georgia, already playing Michigan State, already playing North Carolina, USC, NC State. They had to fly to Miami. And then 2 weeks later, they got to go fly out to San Francisco. Like, welcome to Notre Dame's world. 2015, they have to go fly out to Boston 1 week and then out to Stanford the next week. It's like, welcome to Notre Dame's life. You know what I mean? Like,
real quick before I get out of here, which service academy are you sweating more?
Probably Navy right now because they're first. But they are doing a little bit of some different stuff right now, Bill. Throwing the ball a lot more effectively, which can be dangerous. Army's running the pure triple it looks good.
Does it?
It looks good.
Okay.
I think Navy's got a little bit more talent, and I've been back and forth on this. I think I might even said Army earlier in the week, but as I kind of watched a little bit more film, Navy's got a little bit more talent on defense. They got a safety to keep an eye on named Rayon Lane, excuse me. So legitimately good. Like he could transfer to a lower Power 4 team and play. They've actually got some guys like that, but the Horvath kid is throwing the ball really well.
That's a Hilliard, Ohio kid.
Yeah.
Hilliard Darby. He's a local kid. So, that's what I wanted to ask.
Probably Navy. And then the Army game's going to be at Yankee Stadium, and it's going to be the pomp and circumstance. And Notre Dame usually does pretty well in those type of environments.
Yeah.
So, so the concern about Army is that Notre Dame might peek ahead because they got USC the next week. Right. But speaking of, Notre Dame's got to fly to Bronx, New York 1 week, and then the next week you got to fly out to LA. So welcome to being a Notre Dame fan there, Big Ten fans. The best part is you're complaining about something that you wanted. Right. You guys didn't have to bring those Pac-12 teams in your league.
Right.
You didn't have to do that.
I didn't do it.
I'm talking about the Big Ten. I'm talking to the Big Ten. Jane, we don't have a runway long enough. Well, maybe you shouldn't have brought USC and, all those teams in your league. Well, use some of the extra TV money to extend the runway by, 50 feet or whatever. So
fair enough.
It's hilarious when they're crying about something they wanted. I love it. Typical Big Ten. I'm just joking, Bill. Hey, Bill, great stuff, man. Going to be a fun weekend. I know you and I are going to be texting all weekend like we were last weekend. Like I told you about Tennessee, man. I told you to watch out for.
Who are you going to tell me? Yeah, who are you going to text me that you told me?
I think we were pretty close.
Sandy.
Like to me, the reason I said that about the Arkansas game is because I got the sense that you didn't think there was any chance that Arkansas was
I didn't. And I'll give you credit.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your text. I might have. There's some.
You did.
I got hung. So I will tell this before we go real quick. I go to the shoe, and sometimes like to understand a sports writer's process, go to the shoe, got there early, do the game, get back in the press box. Didn't write about Ohio State, Iowa right away. Wrote straight into Alabama. Got home, settled in. My wife's home, and Grant goes up to bed into the Michigan game, and she just kind of looked at my face when Arkansas started beating Tennessee because I'm like processing how am I forming a top 25? What in the world does the playoff picture look like? She just goes, "I'll see it at 3 a.m." I'm like, "Yep." I was like, "Thanks, honey. I'll talk to you later." And maybe it'll be another weekend like that. So it's going to be a fun weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I don't call out on the games where we were close, but you picked a team to win and I picked the other team to win. But it was like
a good call
within a similar range. This is more so like where it's like there was a big difference.
No, you were,
and I thought Tennessee was going to win. I didn't pick Arkansas to win.
No, you just said it would be close, and I'm like, no, dude,
I didn't give a score. I just said. are we sure that Tennessee is who we think they are yet? And Arkansas is a scrappy defense.
Right. And called it. Good call.
So with their backup quarterback.
We'll see. Opportunities. I anticipate we'll be texting back and forth during Ohio State, Oregon.
Yes. And the LSU Ole Miss game is going to be happening at the same time. It's going to be a fun evening. Bill, thank you so much, man. Another great job by you. I appreciate you being on with me. We'll be back next week. And of course, folks, they've got CFB Nation has obviously had their week 6 recap. I'm going to go and finish up publishing their previews for this weekend. So I know you guys talked about a lot of different games on the CFB Nation podcast. If you're not a subscriber to CFB Nation podcast, definitely do so. That is part of the Irish Breakdown family. So you're definitely going to want to check that out and check out what those guys had to say. So Bill, thank you for being with me, folks. You guys can find him at sportingnews.com. You can also find him on it's at Bill Bender 92. That's right, on Twitter. So check his work out. Bill does a great job. I'm not just saying that because he's on the show. He's on the show because I believe that. So there you go. So anyway, Bill, thanks for being with me, man. Enjoy it. Wait, actually, did you say where you're going to be this weekend?
I'm off the couch. Thank the Lord.
You're on the couch.
Thank the Lord. I get to watch all this off the couch. And,
then you need to be giving me updates on the 3:30 games because I won't be able to watch them, like on how things are looking. So sounds good.
Like a plan.
All right, brother. Be good, man. Thanks to everybody for being with us. 5:00 tonight. IB Nation Sports Talk. We'll be back tomorrow, 1:00 for our Irish Breakdown mailbag. Check it out. And then, of course, the post-game show after Notre Dame versus Stanford. So thanks for being with us, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. For y'all in the South and Florida, pray that your homes are still in good shape. Pray for everyone's safety. And just continue staying strong and getting through it. And we'll talk to you all again very soon here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.